Welcome to this working session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is audio recorded, so for participants, please make sure you speak loudly and clearly for the accessibility of those who are listening. We'll go around and do introductions. Please say your name and your role. Kim Baker, Chair.
Brenda Albrecht, Exec Director of Administrative Services.
Carly Anderson, School Board.
Judy Kelleher, Board of Education.
David Anderson, School Board.
Dave Haven, Executive Director of Student Services.
Megan Blazik, Director of MTSS.
Greg Crowe with LSU Financial Advisor.
Steve Porter, Director of Community Education.
Devin Reyes, Facility Use and Systems Manager.
Bill Holmgren, Executive Director of Business Services.
Brian Thompson, School Board.
Bree Shinley, School Board.
Emily McDonald, Assistant Superintendent.
Terry Lynn, School Board.
Doug Van Zyl, Superintendent of Schools.
All right, thank you very much. We do have a packed agenda tonight, so we'll try to be mindful of the times that are listed, just to keep the discussion flowing so that we can get all of those topics discussed. Before we get started in the discussion, I just want to remind everyone of our five meeting norms that we decided on as a board. Be prepared, be engaged, respectful dialogue, no surprises, and one board, one voice. So saying that, we'll go ahead and get started with topic A, which is the bond pre-sale report.
Yes, good evening. Tonight I have Greg Crowe here from Ellers. They are our financial advisor. As you know, a few weeks ago, you passed a resolution to sell general obligation bonds for our LTFM program. And 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be accepting bids on selling those bonds. So Greg is here tonight to go over our pre-sale report, and if there's any questions that you have, we have new board members that have been through a bond sale before. So that's the purpose of this discussion.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Take it away, Greg.
Thanks, Bill. It's really nice to be here tonight. As I said, my name is Greg Crowe. I'm the president of Ellers Companies. We're your financial advisor. We work with, just by way of background, work with cities, counties, and school districts primarily in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And in Minnesota, we work with the majority of school districts. And I think it was a year or two ago that I was here, and we were cleaning out our basement, and I found what I think was our first bond issue with Lakeville School District. It was from 1960 or 1964. So we've been partners with the district for a very long time. We've gone through a lot of bond referendums and bond issues and planning. So it's fun to have been part of watching the district grow to what it is now, and we really appreciate that relationship. We provide a wide range of financial services, and you'll mostly see us related to bond issues and elections, but we also do things behind the scenes like arbitrage, which is really exciting. We can jump into if you're interested in it. Continuing disclosure, some of those other things that the district needs done regularly. And so we worked on the operating referendum as well, for example, providing financial and tax information related to those two ballot questions that were on the ballot. And congratulations for getting one of them passed. It was not a great year for every school district. My home district up in Chisago, we failed both. There was low voter turnout, and so hopefully for the benefit of schools, we'll get other opportunities to present these to the voters and maybe get more results. But congratulations if you just get one pass. It will be a meaningful benefit to your students. So we do regularly help the district with bond issues, either voter approved for new buildings or, as is the case tonight, to finance deferred maintenance for your long-term facilities maintenance program. And as you know, you do a 10-year plan every year that designates your projects for deferred maintenance. You're one of a special set of about 28 school districts that can address your deferred maintenance issues without limitation. Other school districts are capped at $1 per student amount that you're not capped with. So you have some freedom to not only fund the projects you need to fund, but also to be creative in a way that helps manage the tax rate and the tax impact on your taxpayers as you think about all the other things that you're doing that might impact levies. So our strategy in this funding program is typically to help set an annual levy amount that goes into your general fund, and then every 2 years there's a bond issue that supplements that annual amount that's also used for project costs. And those are typically, we always want those to be kind of the bigger projects or the more long-lasting components of your facilities maintenance plan, because you know, technically you don't want to buy short-term things with bonds that you're paying off over a longer period. You have a lot of flexibility in bond structures, so sometimes you'll see us talking about 20-year bonds, sometimes because of the structure and the amount, we might do 5, 8, 10-year bonds for the district, and so there's a paid off a little sooner. But we have to take that into account as we think about what kind of projects you're funding. So as part of the process, you set the 10-year plan, which you adopted in July, and then you adopted the resolution 2 years ago of intent to issue the bonds, and that's a statutorily required action. And then we provide this pre-sale report, which is a kind of two reasons to do it. One is a due diligence document, so the board kind of understands the process, and it also provides updated financial information, primarily connected to changing interest rates and our estimates of the rates on the loan, which is what the bond is, the district might receive when we go to market with the financing package. So if you want to walk through this with me, I'll kind of give you some highlights of the process itself. And you'll note on the front that it's 20.850 general obligation facilities maintenance bonds. That's what the board approved a couple of weeks ago. And general obligation simply means that the district is pledging the full faith of its tax base to make the bond payments. So it's from an investor standpoint, it's a very secure investment, because you're basically saying we will pay this no matter what. And so that helps with the interest rate that you get at the time of the bond sale. So if you look on the inside front cover, we describe the issue, the purpose, the authority that are fairly straightforward. I do want to mention the term /call feature. As I mentioned, the bonds can be a variety of terms. You're only limited in the statute to 30 years or less. You can have a 1-year bond. You can have, as I said, a 5-year bond, 20-year bond. These bonds are being issued with a term of 11 years and 1 month. And I'll show you why when we get to a planning document toward the end of the attachments. But that relates to keeping it short enough to pay it off relatively quickly, but also not increase taxes past where you want them to be. And just like a mortgage, a shorter bond will carry a shorter overall interest rate. So a 20-year bond is going to have a higher overall interest rate than an 11-year bond. So we have to balance that with the tax impact that putting the principal and interest payments on your levy will create. And then the call feature is when you can refinance the bonds. So the bonds, the bondholder, the person that buys the bonds, wants to know that they can hold the bond and get the interest for a little while. And if you have, like most of us with our mortgages, that we can refinance the day after we take the mortgage out, you pay a premium at a higher interest rate because, say, if you wanted to refinance in 1 year, you'd pay more in interest because of the uncertainty of the bondholder knowing how long they can hold that bond. So issuers have what's called a call date. The call date is how long you will wait before you refinance the bond. Typically for municipal tax exempt debt, which is what this is, that's 8 to 10 years. And so you say we won't refinance this debt for 8 to 10 years. And then typically the market is ambivalent to that, and they will charge you a higher. If it's shorter than that, you might see a higher interest rate than that. If it's longer, you don't get a lower rate, and you lose the flexibility of being able to refinance if interest rates are lower. So this bond is callable in 2033, which is a 20-year bond, or it's callable in 2032 for the bond maturities in 2033 and later. And so basically a 10-year call. And you'll always hear us talking about bond maturities because technically each year of the bond is its own little loan. So 11-year bond has 11 loans built into it. 1-year loan, a 2-year loan, a 3-year loan. Whenever there's a principal payment, that kind of stands alone and it carries its own interest rate. And then we kind of average them all out to tell you what the average interest rate for the bond is. And so that's why it says the bonds maturing in 2033 later will be callable in 2032. Bank qualification is a technical term, basically based on if you issue less than $10 million of bonds, certain banks get a tax advantage from bidding, and so you can get lower interest rates. That's a fixed limit. This bond in and of itself, it combines all of your bonds, and this in and of itself is above $10 million, so nothing you do can be bank qualified. So we just make a note of that in this. Now, the bottom of the page mentions state credit enhancement. This is a free program that you agreed to participate in when you passed the bond resolution 2 weeks ago. And what this program is the state says, if you fail to make your bond payment, we will step in and make the payment on your behalf. They don't just let you get away with it, they take the money away from you in your next payments from the state. And really, it's never been used by a school district because you do have that unlimited taxing authority to pay bond payments. What it does allow is for you to go to the market with not just your individual district credit rating, but with the state's credit rating. So you carry a dual rating, and for the state right now it's AAA. And so you carry that really high AAA rating along with the district's individual credit rating, which is mentioned at the top of the next page. Right now the district is at a AA2 underlying rating, which is just a straight AA, and we got a rating call yesterday with the rating agency, so they reevaluate that every time you issue that. There's some boilerplate language about.
So is it looking favorable to improve our credit rating?
At this time, no. Just to be frank with you, you know what your general fund budget situation is, and that's the biggest challenge you're facing. And I'm, is it AA2 or AA3? Two, okay. So your fund balance reserves right now, where they stand as audited results are lower than your peers.
Yep.
So the credit rating agencies take 3 things into account broadly in what kind of rating they give the district. One is your individual financial situation. 2 is the local economy and tax base. 3 is governance. So really the board's role in managing the school district. You're very strong in local economy and tax base because it's been growing, the tax base is still developing, so that's not an issue. Governance is not an issue. It's pretty standard across all school districts. There's a low deviation if, for example, the more information is provided to the board and budget to actual investments, some of those kinds of things. But you're viewed as a well-administered district, and so that's not penalizing you. But when they look at financials, they not only look at how you perform, but how you perform to peers in the same rating category. And right now, your fund balance is very low relative to your peers, both in Minnesota and across the country, and relative to their benchmarks. On the upside, your enrollment is growing and is projected to continue to grow. And we did talk pretty extensively about the budget decisions that you made to turn around the budget situation and start rebuilding your fund balance. And that was received positively, I'd say.
Yes, it was.
By the rating agency. They tend to generally be pretty non-committal about how they hear what they hear, but the analysts reacted pretty positively to that. And so I guess at this point, my hope is that they don't do an additional downgrade and they keep the rating the same. It will take some time of rebuilding your fund balance to get to the point where they might consider an upgrade for you. And that does have an impact on the interest rate that you see for the bonds. So it is a financial decision beyond your general fund when you're making spending decisions about fund balance. It has an impact on the interest rate you pay for your bonds as well. Method of sale, just mentioned that
Can you clarify, so we're at a double 2 rating right now, is that what
Yeah,
I'm
double
understanding?
A2.
Okay, and then a double A1 is the highest? Is that?
No, so AAA is the highest.
Okay.
And that's your state rating, your
Yep.
carrying out credit enhanced rating. And then AA 1, 2, and 3 are like AA plus, AA, and AA minus. So AA1 is kind of the second highest.
Yeah. So if it was a triple A, it's an A, double A1 would be an A minus, double A2, we could say it's
AA
we're at a
1
B
would be an
plus.
A plus, AA would be a straight AA, or AA2 would be a
Yep.
straight AA, AA3 would be the equivalent of AA minus
Got it, all right. So we're 3 steps down.
from AAA.
From AAA.
Yes. And there are 2 or 3 Moody's AAA rated districts, so that's pretty rare.
Okay.
Izetta, Edina, there's one more, I think, there's 3. There's a few, primarily metro, but also Rochester and suburbs that are in the AA range.
Yep.
The vast majority of Minnesota school districts are in the single A range, either A1, A2, or A3. So between the single A plus and the single A minus.
So we're still at the top.
You are above kind of the average in Minnesota, primarily because of your tax base and employment statistics that most districts outside of the metro area can't match. Method of sale, I'll just simplify that by telling you that on the date, in 2 weeks when we bring bids, we basically, there's an eBay for bonds. And so the bonds will be out there in 2 minutes to 9:30 in the morning. Bids will start ticking in. And then unlike a roofing contract or something, there's no quality of bid because all the money is the same money. And so we'll look at the interest rates and bring a recommendation to your board meeting that night to award the sale of the bonds to the lowest interest rate bidder. Typically, we see at least 3 bidders in this market. There's still been some demand, even though rates are higher. So we might see 5, 6, or 10 bidders, and more is always better because the more people that bid, the better chance you have to get a lower rate. We do mention premium pricing in here, and that's kind of in the weeds bond term, but basically sometimes when you sell bonds, people will pay you more for them than you're selling them for. And if that happens, you have the opportunity, it's called a premium, and you have the opportunity to use those funds for your construction account or to lower the amount of the borrowing. In this case, as you'll see in our financial estimates, we're assuming you'll receive a premium bid and that those funds will be deposited in your construction fund as a contingency to finance project costs. There's a note on the bottom of page 2 that you don't have any debt that you work refinancing at this time, which we review every 6 months or so. And page 3 is some boilerplate language about continuing disclosure and arbitrage monitoring, which we provide to the school district. And then the opportunity to invest the bond proceeds because rates are good now and you can use any bond proceeds investments while they're sitting in the bank before you pay project costs you use for project costs. On page 4 is simply a summary of the other professionals, including your bond counsel, cleaning agent, and rating agencies that will be engaged. Page 5 is a calendar. So 2 weeks ago, you adopted the resolution. We have an estimated date in there. I think we were thinking we'd come out on October 24th, but the presentation obviously is tonight, the 14th. And Monday, we had a due diligence call to go through the prospectus for the bonds, which is called the official statement, and make sure that everything was accurate and complete. That'll be distributed Thursday to potential bidders. And then we also have the conference call with the rating agency. So on the 28th, we'll receive those proposals and bring them to you. And on December 21st will be the closing date when you actually receive the proceeds of the bonds. There's a couple of attachments we can go through relatively quickly. Page 6 is sources and uses, which is where does the money come from and how is it spent. So as I mentioned, if you look at the top, you'll receive $20.85 million from the bond proceeds. we're estimating a $700,000 reoffering premium. That amount will change, will be different in each bid, and will be calculated as part of the true interest cost of the bonds, which is what we'll do to sign the lowest cost proposal to bring to the board meeting. And then we're estimating about $250,000 of investment limits. So we have about $21.8 million to spend. And then the uses include a couple $100,000 for the underwriter's discount, which is the compensation that's paid to the bank or the underwriter of the bonds, and that's kind of like points on a mortgage. It's basically what they take as their fee up front. And then there's $100,000 of legal and fiscal costs, which includes our fee, the bond agency, or the bond attorney's fee, the rating agency's fee, leaving you about $21.5 million for project costs. There's a chart on page 7 which shows the principal and interest payments for the bonds. And if you look at the middle and the bottom, we're estimating a true interest cost of 4.5%. That will change based on the actual bid results on the day of sale in 2 weeks. That's our estimate of where the market is now with a little bit of additional cushion. And then page 8 is an eye chart that even I can really read, and I know what's on there, but it's really a summary of all of your principal and interest payments for existing bonds and the new bonds, as well as other levies for capital purposes. It's easier to just review on this last page. This off page 9, which shows graphically the tax rates for all of those purposes, and outlines kind of why we structure the bonds the way we do. And really, as you can see, our goal is to keep tax rates flat in the near term and then start dropping down. And then as you consider additional or other projects, either voter approved or board approved, we had opportunities to finance those while keeping tax rates level. So compared with taxes payable in 2023, the levies for these bonds start in 2024, and the tax rate on the capital side is actually lower than last year. So issuing these bonds actually doesn't increase taxes compared to where they were last year. And so that's been our goal with these board approved bonds, unless there's explicit direction to allow the tax rate to go up, is to keep taxes level or have them drop off. And I hope I covered everything. I'm sorry I went on a little, I'm talking as fast as I could.
It's all right.
But
We've had a lot worse.
I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you might have about this.
I think it's important to point out that strategy on that last page, just for you and for the folks that maybe listen or don't know, is that really that is the ultimate goal, is you want to keep things at a plateaued level in regard to taxes. And then you have the ability to come and do things like this where you can do things to improve your district without increasing taxes. So I think that's a very sound strategy. A lot of places don't always do that.
Right. And it's important to note with that that isn't just this bond issue. On the previous page, we're showing $100 million, $110 million of bonds issued over the next year, and $300 million of pay-as-you-go levy. So $400 million worth of deferred maintenance costs being covered over the next 25 years or so, without a tax increase, and actually with reductions in taxes over that time.
Well, and I think this came up during our community forum when the people were talking about you keep asking for taxes and they keep going up and up and up. But the board does plan on when to add taxes, because there will be a decline or a drop-off in taxes. And so when you look at this, this is a planned strategy that past boards have implemented as we know we're going to go out. So like in 1996, in those years when we were doing bonding every other year, we had to plan this to minimize the impact to the taxpayer without a lot of ups and downs. So then what you really see is the impact of the community growth and the impact of their home value. The rest of this is pretty steady. So.
I've got a few, so go ahead.
So if we, because I think we anticipate obviously needing to build in the future, so you're saying if we seek more bonds, it'll somehow, all of this will be adjusted to keep it? Okay.
Right, so if you, it's kind of, if you drew a straight line across, all this white space under that straight line is sort of opportunity to add.
Keep it, but keep the
possible,
tax
keep
flat.
taxes level.
Okay.
If you do a big project like if you went to the voters for, we had 3 bonds that we worked on this fall that were in the $200 million range. If you did that, there might be an increase, but people expect that there might be some increase from doing those bigger projects, but we would still leverage that white space to minimize the tax impact while maximizing the resources available to the district. And there's also the dark green bars are your pay-as-you-go levy. So over, after about 10 years, we've really almost eliminated the bonding and had all of your deferred maintenance costs covered with pay-as-you-go. And you don't have to do that. And so you could pay down some of those levies by continuing to issue bonds, and that would lower this whole section of the chart as well. And we would take that into account at the same time. And so and the statutory reference that MDE uses refers to the 28 districts that can do this deferred maintenance spending as 1A districts. And all of the 1A districts we work with use this strategy to manage tax base, to leverage resources, but then also when they have to go to the voters, because you can't use it for new buildings, for example, we can use the 1A rules on LTFM to really manage your levy overall and make it more, give you more ability to manage that levy when you talk to your taxpayers and bring those bigger proposals to you.
So for those that are listening, may not be able to see, just want to, as I read this, we're on page 7. In the course of 11 years and 1 month, we're spending about $7.1 million in interest. Is that, just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly, for a $21 million upfront cost or principal. Okay, and so in year 2025, we're paying $1 million in interest and so forth in year 26 and 27. With our interest rate being a AA2, I don't know, what are the advantages of being a AA1 in those interest payments? Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, that's 33% in interest fees for a 10-year loan, so, go ahead.
Yeah, and so just for context, part of the reason for that is you can see they're pretty minimal interest payment, or principal payments till 2029. So you're really mostly just paying interest for those first few years, and that's to get the wraparound, is how we describe it, around the old debt, so the tax rates initially don't go up.
Yep.
And you can start paying principal once you start paying off some of your existing debt. Bearing that in mind, typically we say that one notch, which is like the difference between a AA3 and a AA2, or a AA2 and a AA1, is about 5 basis points, which is 0.05% interest. So, and I'd have to rerun this. I could ballpark it in my head, but I don't want to do that.
No, that's fine.
But that's really, we could, and actually, you'll see the difference when we bring the results, because it might be less than 4.5% because rates have, we built some cushion into this and rates have dropped almost 0.3% over the last couple of weeks for municipal bonds. So you'll kind of be able to see the shift when you see the actual interest rate result, which hopefully will be lower than this, and be able to compare the 7.1 and 4.5 versus whatever it
To
is.
what the real market value is.
Yeah,
Yeah, the reason I asked from a AA1 to a 2, I don't know what the interest cost savings would be, but, the ask is here, we're gonna get $20 million to use those funds over the next 11 years. So roughly, I'm assuming it's $2 million a year that we're consuming of that principal. Does that sound about right?
No, these will be spent for deferred maintenance projects over the next 2 years.
For the next 2 years? Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah, and the other important piece of that is that you're hedging against construction inflation at the same
Yeah.
time by paying interest on the bonds, extending projects that might at this time be growing in cost at I don't know, at least 5%, maybe 20%.
It was 20 a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much for that information, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me, and we've got a team of 3 folks that you see on the front page of the report that work with Lakeville. I think Sheldon McCoy, who's our team lead for school projects, will be at the ceremony in 2 weeks, so we get to meet a friendly face, besides my bald head. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Great night.
All right, so we'll move on to item B, which is the facility use update by Bill and Devin.
Okay, yeah, we're here just to give you an update on the work that's been done on facility usage since we looked at the budget adjustments that we did last spring. So the work we've done since last spring through the summer and now in full force this fall. So I'll let Devin kind of run with an overview of what we've done. I think we have a pretty good summary here of what we've done. And any questions you might have.
Thank you, everyone, for letting me come and talk tonight. The handout that you have there is a very brief update, but it does contain some pertinent details about the new updates, the implementations, the rate changes. So if it's okay, I can just sort of go over things, give a broad view, and then if you have questions, I'm more than happy to go ahead and answer them. For recollection's sake, the first day of school year this year, our class 2 and 3 rental rates did increase. This was all items that I'm going to go over that were approved in the addendum and went into effect in July this past year. So those class 2 and 3 rental rates did increase. Our staff fees did increase to help offset the cost of having our staff in the building, plus additional. And then the implementation of our class 1 usage fee, which is that $10 an hour for our local non-district sponsored groups.
Just for clarity, since we do have people that are listening, can
Sure.
you clarify like what is class 1, what is class 2,
Absolutely.
what is class 3? Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's start with class 1, just because that is our largest, besides our district sponsored activities for our own students within our classroom day. Those are our local groups that are not underneath our liability umbrella is the simplest term to put it. There's many other qualifiers that determine if a group is district sponsored or not district sponsored, but 97% of our use outside of our classroom day is by our local community user groups. Those would be considered class 1. They are nonprofit or not-for-profit, and that is the simpler terms. When we work with folks who contact our office, we go through multiple different layers of qualifications just to make sure that we answer their questions and get them in the right classification.
Could you provide like 2-3 examples of what a class
Sure.
1 is?
Class 1, there's hundreds of them.
Yeah.
But, so a local youth sports organization, Girl Scout troop, our boosters are considered not district sponsored, but they're obviously local and they're a class 1 user group. Our PTOs are considered a class 1 user group, with the exception of the partnership that they have with our elementary, so it's already been predefined by the business office and communications. Sort of a segue into what a class 2 or class 3 would be if a Girl Scout group or a youth group or a not-for-profit that's not based out of Lakeville Area School District wanted to use our facilities. So, for example, we recently had Courage Kenny and their national basketball wheelchair tournament that Lakeville North building hosted a couple weeks ago. They are a class 2. Their organization that oversaw and was the sponsor for the event was a nonprofit, and not local. So that would be a class 2, so they would pay those classroom rental rates.
And to define not local, as in like they don't have an address or home headquarters isn't in Lakeville.
The latter is one of the main qualifiers.
Thank you.
So then class 3 is any for-profit. Whether they're local or not local, all for-profits would be in the class 3 rental rate.
Thank you for
Yes,
clarifying.
absolutely. So just to recap again, we did have the rental rates that did increase. We were able to increase and update the staff fees, and then the implementation of the class 1 usage fee, which was the $10 an hour. We also implemented, which I do have copies as well, if anybody would like to have a sample copy of that, the facility use and contribution agreement, which was put in place for our class 1 user groups for a couple different reasons. Number one, to highlight the partnerships and the contributions that these groups do. Obviously, you as the Board of Education get to see these on the donation, and you see all those different conversations, but to be able to actually recognize them from our side of operations, meaning outside of a classroom day, boots on the ground type of thing, to be able to take that and then provide, if approved, a credit toward the usage fees. Additionally, it was to, if there was a negative impact on their organization, it was also put in place to be able to help offset that as well, because many of our local youth organizations and our boosters, our local class 1 user groups, make significant contributions to our district in many different ways. Many of them we can take in as a credit, other ones we're not able to simply because of how those funds are raised and donated back into the program. So those are the details that we are currently going to be meeting with Bill and I next week, because this first round, we did have 21 different proposals for contribution agreements. So 21 of our largest local youth organizations did submit everything that they had done, that they had won, that they would like to do.
Yep.
And those forms and that information was received in a timely manner. It was wonderful to see. And as we go through all the layers and line items to find out which items can we approve and whatnot, that's something that Bill's going to be able to go over, and that they will get that information this next week.
So those guidelines are not, so you're working on what those are, what those guardrails are.
Those guys, well, they're already in place.
Yeah, the guidelines are already there. So we've asked them to tell us ahead of time what they want to donate money for.
What they're
Yep.
going to contribute
Because
to this
what we
year.
really want to know is if it's something that's going to help the district, yeah, then we're going to give you credit against your fees, right? But if it's something that they want that we don't need, then that's something different. If they want a Taj Mahal or something, well, the district really doesn't need it. They can still do it. If they want to donate it, that's fine. But it's not going to be a credit against their.
Thank you. Yeah, we typically don't see what they donate because it doesn't ever really get to the board level because nobody ever reports.
I
it
think
up.
in this situation too, we're going to have a better idea of what is being
Yeah,
donated.
well, yeah.
And then it will come to the board. So you see a list of items.
Correct. There, in the past, though, it was just
Yeah, they've
always
kind of gone
taken
around the back
care of.
door. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do hundreds of thousands
Yes.
of dollars
they do.
worth of investment into our facilities. Much of what needs to be done with lighting and everything.
There's some very exciting things that that Bill's gonna be able to share in upcoming
Yeah.
meetings and stuff once things are finalized. I don't want to speak too much more outside of it, just because this is the first round of that we've done this. And I want to respect not just the process, but also all those group leaders who have taken the time to submit everything that they did. Like I said, everyone submitted everything and it's right on time. There was no last minute, oh my goodness moments. I did, if anyone knows me, I'd like to try and communicate extra, not over extra. So we did do weekly email reminders to their group leaders to just say, hey, the deadline's approaching. And it was, I always understood from my role how much they are doing, but knowing that tracking aspect of it and letting them actually speak that truth was pretty marvelous to see. So I'm excited to see what comes up next. So what just got handed out to everyone was what was included in a update to the board this summer when we did bring this contribution agreement concept forward. And I just provided you with the, excuse me, the paper version that they received. So it lays out the guidelines on the front, and then the back side obviously is their application. Supporting documentation is something actually we are currently, this week, actually getting from those groups that maybe filled out the application and things are in process. Maybe they've already paid and they don't have the receipts. Maybe they only have quotes and they want to know if it's something the district wants to move forward on. So those are the items that we're going to work through, and we'll be able to refine how this all looks, because the next timeline, as the update sheet says, is in the spring. And that is our goal, is to have it in the spring each year and not in the fall. So that way then groups can plan, but then also our district can plan, from whether it's projects to staffing and timelines, and just really hopefully get that ebb and flow. Yes, sir.
I have a question regarding a couple of emails we received earlier this year. I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms, but it seems like groups were concerned because they needed liability insurance to use. Can you explain that?
Absolutely, for sure. You know I can talk facilities all day long there. So any group that is deemed to be a non-district sponsored group, and in layman's term, it is not going to fall under the liability. There's other qualifiers. How is the money handled? Is the money handled specifically by district staff, and something that could be brought to the Board of Education to see what this did for the school? If it's handled out as an outside committee. So there's different qualifiers that make that happen. So when we determine that a group is non-district sponsored, we go over, myself and my team go over with those group leaders, that we do need to have a certificate of insurance. And this will sound very scripted because we go through it every day, hundreds of times, it feels like a week. They do need to provide a certificate of insurance listing ISD 194 as additional insured, with a minimum amount of $1.5 million per occurrence in general liability. So, and that is.
I just want to point out that
Yes.
that is by statute too. The amount, the 1.5 million, is by state statute.
Has it always been at 1.5?
1.5 came, I believe, in '09, so it's been quite
For
a
a
while.
long time.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that was a part of that question was
Yeah.
several, like,
Groups.
PTOs and
Yep.
associations have
Yes.
never had an issue, getting the space that they needed for that time. And this year, it was a big struggle for them to do that, so they had to find a different space to rent.
So-
We've been collecting insurance information for
Right.
many years. so
I've been here
it's
since
nothing new.
2016. And,
Yeah.
so
Maybe it's
I
nothing
think-
new, but it's new to those people
Yeah,
that
I
haven't
think
done
I
it.
think that's where we need clarification on.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of, not a lot of new user groups, but there was a lot of change of the guard. And we did find old PDFs or Word documents that had been possibly on file, and someone's, a staff person's, that I met with, for example, I met with one group, and they provided me with a packet I had never seen before, and I've been here for almost 8 years. And it was something that had been prepared prior to mine, but that was what they had. So it's on the back page, one of the silver linings throughout those challenges is that we are in the process of going through any kind of documentation where we have groups from independent providers or student clubs that may have things after school, to our non-district sponsored use, anything like that at all. We're going through and finding out what does the application look like, what does the guidance look like, and making sure that all the verbiage is current to 2023-24 school year, and that we can track all that if we ever need to update it again.
Okay, the liability insurance affects all 3 classes, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Anything, any use determined non-district sponsored, so not under district liability.
And how about, have we thought about grouping these different groups together to get a better interest rate, a better insurance rate?
They're all individuals.
I know, but I'm saying, have we talked about grouping them together?
And what does it cost a group to get that insurance?
Because if you group them together, they're gonna get a better rate.
Well, that'd be up into
But
that's up to
the insurance company.
That's.
I'm just throwing it out there as an idea.
$400 to $500 a year?
Yeah.
It
I'm just throwing it out there as
depends
an
on what-
idea.
So I can't
Keep it to the
obviously
side.
speak on insurance advice, and that's actually something that my staff has directed, that we cannot even suggest where a group can
Yeah,
go and
you
get
get that,
insurance.
yeah.
However, what I can say is that what those premiums are going to vary by individual. It's no different than our health insurance and us determining what we want as part of our health package. It's
Yeah, but if I'm a Girl
individuals.
Scout troop, I can't pay $500 a year for
But what I'm
insurance.
saying is that, so that's a good example. If you want to go specific, Girl Scout groups actually is by the state. They're underneath the Girl Scout group for Minnesota. So Girl Scouts of Minnesota actually provide their insurance, so they
Some of
don't
those
have to go
groups have
and
their
buy
own
their own.
We should find out how many groups do that. I think that's a great idea.
So what we do is we actually, with any groups like that, with Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, to be
Right.
specific to that, when those requests come in, that's one of the first things that we work through, is we look and see if they've ever had insurance in the past, have they been with us in the past, and if they are part of an organization that may have something overhead. There's, different, for sports organizations, there's different USA Youth, chapters that they can do things and they can fall under that umbrella. So we really do try and make suggestions within what we're allowed to say. Legally and liability wise, we just can't go too much further than that.
I guess if I was I'm thinking that devil's advocate here. If I'm a PTO group that hasn't paid for years and we work in a building and we raise money for the school, now we need liability insurance.
That actually came up shortly after I started here, when it was determined that the PTOs are such a valuable partner for our district. But at the end of the day, they have a board, they have their own bylaws, and they are not governed by the school, the Board of Education within a school district. Therefore, then that places them in a situation where they do need to have their own insurance, and that's protection for them.
Yeah.
And everything they do and everything they do with their students too.
Is it true that if they're just having a meeting of the board or of the PTO in a building, they don't need the insurance, but if they're sponsoring an activity, they need the insurance?
That's actually, no. If they're going to be on district grounds,
Okay.
that has to happen.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter what the activity is?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, then for PTO groups, obviously, because they are so integrated into our schools, I agree. I think with what you said about having them pay $400 or $500 doesn't make sense to me. So can we just agree to can we refund them the payment?
I'm gonna tell you that it opened up a big can of worms
Yep.
because of our booster groups and everybody else.
Totally agree, but I think we can
So-
all agree that PTOs play a different role.
No.
So
I-
what would that be my point of view?
Yeah,
Can
most
I
of our,
say-
Yeah.
most of our PTOs though are getting their insurance, they're not by themselves getting
Right,
insurance.
right, but it's the
They're on a
group.
statewide, when I get the CAIs from them, it's not from that particular group. So they're picking up the insurance elsewhere.
That's what I was asking
Yeah.
about, consolidating insurance.
Say it again, Bill?
Just as,
They're
just
all
like we talked,
consolidating insurance, that's why I was
well, just like we
asking about
talked,
before.
anybody that has like a state organization, they fall under that umbrella, and they can get the COIs from them.
Yeah.
Another example of that, not just with the PTOs having a state function that they could go to, example, when we have when we have a church organization who rents from us. A lot of the church's insurance, they actually do have their own
Large organization.
insurance
Sure.
that they will go through because it's specialized to what their intent of their organization is. So very rarely do we have groups who say we have to go out and get our own, we don't know where to go, or anything else like that. For one-off events, there's event insurance, there's many different options. But as far as like saying, it's a flat $400, I would never want someone to assume that that's what it is, because there's a large world of insurance options out there. I just know that from our side of the coin and what my team and I have to do to protect the district's liabilities, I have to follow state statute and what Director Holmgren tells me I need to get done.
So I'm in favor of refunding PTO organizations. So can we vote to that, or
That's
or
not
how
an
does that
option.
work?
No, that's
It's
not
not
an
an
option,
It's not an
because
action.
we
Right.
need insurance from any group that's not.
Oh, let me
ours.
rephrase that. I don't mind them paying for it, but can't we reimburse them for them actually getting
She was
it?
just saying you don't know what each one is paying because
We-
of the different.
As a
But you
school
would get
district,
that,
as a school district, I can't donate funds to any organization,
No,
no matter who they are.
no.
So we
it's
can't,
not-
we can't donate it to them, right? But we,
So I can't pay it to them.
I think part of the issue with
Doesn't make
this
sense.
We're not
is
getting
that
service from them.
the school is like the only facilities that people can really use in Lakeville. We don't have a community center or anything like that for individual groups to get rooms. I know the library has a few, but those are always full. So this is like their only option. And I think for some of these smaller groups, the fees are just hard. Just being real.
Well, so have we generated any revenue from this?
Yes. I mean, we'll know more
I
once
want to
we,
be, I can definitely.
I guess we'll get to it.
Yeah.
At this point,
Is the intent to actually
until we
generate
know
revenue?
what they want to donate, we haven't charged anybody for it.
Yeah.
They have an idea of what they're gonna pay, they know how many hours that they're using.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
they
what-
know that we'll settle up at the end of the year, but at this point, we
But
haven't
the
charged
intent
anybody.
here isn't to generate revenue.
It
It's
is.
to just
Offset.
get,
Offset
offset
costs.
the costs.
It's offset costs, because in
And so
essence,
it's
what
not-
we're doing is we're subsidizing all of these groups by
Right.
giving them our spaces. And our spaces cost money. You come in, your lights on, well, I don't get any revenue from the state of Minnesota to cover lights for a third party.
Yeah, so it's not.
Or their heat, or their, so that's why we have just a small fee now, just, we're looking at covering costs. We're not looking at making any money. We're just trying to cover it.
Yep.
We also
Does-
talked about the coverage of security and things like that.
Yeah,
for
plus
them
we
is-
need somebody in our building. We can't just open the door and just let people in and do what they want. And that's kind of where we were about 5 years ago.
Yep.
We didn't have any oversight in our buildings, and it was scary.
So part of the budget reduction, we were targeting roughly $300,000 to $400,000 in offsetting costs.
Yes.
So on a monthly basis, based on user fee tracking, are we roughly estimating $30,000 to $40,000 in user fees?
I don't think we're gonna get to 300, but we
Okay.
are gonna definitely make a dent. I mean, we're gonna be from where we had nothing.
But I would also say, without having the ability to see what people were donating before,
Right.
that is probably gonna offset that additional
300.
difference that he's talking about, because we have folks that buy equipment or provide a coach or do whatever, that now we'll be able to actually say, well, you've given $30,000 in donations to the district that would have cost us $30,000 had you not done that. Does that make sense? So it may not just be the revenue that comes in from the rental of facilities, it'll also be
We're
us being
offsetting-
able to track the donations that were never tracked.
And we're offsetting the budget someplace else.
Right, and so it's not always a revenue generator, it's an expenditure offset, is another way to look at some of the things that they'll do.
Great work.
Great, well, I
Bree, did you
can
have a
say that
question?
we're done, and we just don't go to the second page if you'd like.
Bree, did you?
Maybe we'll touch
Yes.
on it. I've gotten just some complaints about just the permit process. Can you just explain
Yep.
the permit? I don't know if that was gonna be on here or not,
Is-
but, okay,
Yep.
maybe I'm jumping the gun
Is
too
it
much.
okay
but-
if I address that
Yes,
after?
yes.
I'm not
Yep.
gonna read verbatim all these Q&As here on there. It's mainly, I know that there's been communications, whether it's been to Superintendent Van Zyl or to any of you or to myself, to Bill or to Steve here. But whenever there is a big change, there is not only going to be growing pains, but there is going to be learning opportunities, there's going to be agreements and disagreements. So that we all know. The flip side of that coin, and I reference it in the second Q&A there, as far as, have there been any challenges? And I really took all the communications just in the last 3 months that I've received, that I have been inquired about, whether it be from different leadership in the district, and tried to put them in these Q&As that are on this first page. I'm more than happy to answer anything that I did not touch on here, but in regards to the challenges and the permitting process and things like that, specifically this year was probably one of the most challenging years as far as determining how things work. I'm going to give you a very brief snapshot, otherwise we'll be here till 1 in the morning and no one wants that. So at the beginning of the year, there are over 10,000 space requests that come through my office. And that not only happens within my office to set those off, and that's not just gyms or common spaces, that's classrooms, that's anything around our district. Then our team not only has to put those together, but we have to hold and wait for multiple layers and departments and buildings and hundreds of different internal things to process into that same schedule. While we support those logistics, we help push all those through, we look for conflicts and all of that. When even 1 or 2 of those dominoes out of 100 fall a different way than it should within the process that we understand it to be, it creates challenges. So when we have, the other side of the coin is larger programs within our district, meaning our district-sponsored teams are now taking up additional gym spaces, taking up even 15 minutes to 30 minutes longer. If that communication doesn't get to me within a timely thing, or I have to find out a different way how we can fix something, as you can see, there's a lot of different moving pieces within it. So it was never an intent for anything to be delayed. I know that there was a couple of different larger permits that did for about a week or two, to speak specifically to what you're talking about. We have already been developing some steps that we're going to be able to actually work on those come February and March, instead of having to wait all the way till September or October for internal department leadership to get things to us. So I think that there would be a great big better, but it definitely was not without its growing pains. And I just need to be very clear, and I put the note in here, the challenges that were there as far as the mass amount of requests and gym to come in, we receive that large amount every year, but to have that with all of our district programs that utilize our after-school spaces, gyms, commons, auditoriums, to have nearly every single one of those grow. Middle school sports grew phenomenally for their winter programs, and they didn't just offer a sport in one place, now it's in 3 places and they're needing longer time. And because of that, and another example is district cheer grew so much that we needed to house differently because of where online school and with the selling of the ALC. So there's just a lot of dominoes, and that's the easiest way for me to say that. We have a lot of checks and balances within our team, and we're always looking for ways to improve. And we're humans, so there will be some error along the way, but we do everything we can to try and wrap our arms around and take care of people. So.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Brian Thompson?
How many Class 1 groups are there?
I would love to get you that information, but I don't want to guess on that one. We
Is
have
it
well
over 100?
Well over 400.
Well over 400. Okay, so thank you for sharing, because to me, like, when you fly, either like the medallions or the super class or the Uber levels or whatever it may be, and I'm like, when you have 400 groups all in Class 1, how do you then prioritize who gets it, who doesn't get that?
That is a much longer conversation, but the short version is, we in this district have an order of priority of scheduling, so our district-sponsored groups and so on. Those groups that have historical use within our buildings will fall into that higher priority after district-sponsored and independent providers. But I don't want to go too granular on that in this setting, only because it could be heard by someone who still has questions, and I just want to give them the opportunity to have a conversation with us first to find out exactly where things work. A lot of times with those 400, those associations represent hundreds of youth teams or hundreds of different organizations. So the number is probably well over 400, but you have different groups who oversee that. So
Maybe you need some subgroups within Class 1. I mean, that's just saying. I mean, 400 is a lot. I mean, okay.
all right, so hopefully, excuse me. Hopefully, the talking points of the questions and concerns that have been communicated to you, hopefully I'm able to address those there. We did talk, excuse me, a bit about the contribution agreement. And I'll go really quick here. On the back page, I don't expect you to be able to read the fine print. It was approved to be printed in color. Only so that way then you can know that this was actually something that we have never done before as a district. Thank you, sorry about that. So this year we implemented a facility use planning calendar. And this is not something that just me and my small team use. This is something that is for the public. This is something that is for all of our activities directors, our teachers, our staff, whoever would ever need to determine, I need to be able to get into the building to go to my classroom. I need to go to sports practice, whatever it may be. For our outside user groups, it also is set in place an accountability factor to be able to know, okay, on these days that schools are closed, I get to go into the building, but it's going to cost me because I need to pay for a staff person because of the fact that we are trying to offset those custodial fees and whatnot. So all of that is laid out in one planning calendar. This can be found on the facility use web pages of the facility of the school district website, And then also on the calendar page of the district website, it's linked there as well. So it's been a really great tool. I was actually in a meeting with Bill yesterday, and he has it hanging on his wall. He's quite pleased.
It's like your family picture.
Yeah,
That's
there you go. The other items at the bottom, we don't need to go into detail other than some very exciting positive things are coming up. We have an after-hours facility contact plan that's going to be coming into fruition finally here this month. And it will be a resource at all of our school buildings when the public is accessing them. And if they have a question or they can't get into a space that they've previously reserved. One of the things that our community has constantly expressed prior to the last couple of years is when they're in a facility, they can't find someone if they need someone. So we're gonna take that negative and turn it into a positive and try and create some better relationships there. We also are updating and doing some large updates to the facility use web pages and how those are linked with the school websites, as well as creating a glossary term that's going to cross-reference everything from where do PTOs fall, how do they pay a fee. It's going to be a one-stop shop, so that way then hopefully it removes some of the gray, and then the concerns that people may have, we can focus on the reality of the concern instead of trying to clear up the gray or the thunderclouds is what I call them. And then the other one is that any major changes, as you remember this past year we spoke on that we hadn't updated staff fees for a long time, or we had never had a usage fee for our class ones, and our rental rates had not been increased. So instead of waiting for 5 or 10 years, we're going to do an annual review of the addendum, and I will bring that to Bill and Steve each February, and then they will bring it forward if it's something that needs to go to Dr. Van Zyl and the board. So that way then we have an annual review. And this is something also that I've been communicating with our local community user group and those leaders because they want to be able to express when they have a concern or when something's going well. And so that'll be a great time to be able to add that in, and they're aware of that timeline too.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So some of the emails that we received as a board related to groups that were renting out like multiple gyms at once for like tournaments, and then the fees associated with that, because then you have multiple buildings that you're renting out. Can you kind of explain how they offset some of that cost, maybe with this contribution agreement or something like that, so that we can kind of see the broader picture of that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Those bigger groups that are using many spaces are the groups that have been donating funds. So when we look at their actual user fees at the end of the year, I don't think there's gonna be much of anything.
So,
They're gonna
okay,
wash.
so kind of reconciles that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we can give you a report of where that shakes out. It'll be next spring.
But to clarify, when they fill out the form, they get an estimated cost
Yes, they do.
of what their cost of renting the facility is gonna be, so they have an idea. So they may get it and say, oh my gosh, it's $3,000 for me to do this weekend, but they're making $15,000 worth of donations. It probably goes away. Does that make sense? But they do get an estimated cost when they fill out the form to be able to say, this is the ballpark you're gonna be in. Is that accurate, Devin?
Yep, and to just 2 points on that. Number one, the usage fees are what would be the offset for any approved credit amounts. I know I sound like, oh, is anything gonna be approved? I can't commit to make it sound like I'm committing to anything because we're not to that step yet. That's gonna be a bill conversation next week. But the credit will be in the spring. Our permitting software is also the same one that all of Extended School Services uses for all of their registrations, and all of Community Ed uses for their classes. We've also used it for when Link 12 would have registration. So the district as a whole uses the software for many different, it's a multifaceted software system, and it automatically builds in for when they request it, it automatically builds in any space, any assigned dollar amount that space would cost that particular classification of a group. It also includes any breakdown for staffing as well. So to be clear, they do get the permit. It will show a total on it. However, for those user groups that their leaders of, and I need to be clear, there's a lot of families and volunteers within these user groups. There is point of contacts and boards that we work with directly who oversee the operation of that. So I think some of the gray and concern that has been voiced, I really believe that it may have been a translation factor from the game of operator, and not to say that this is a game or anything, it is very serious, I take it very seriously, but getting to actually talk with folks, some of the first things we say when I get those calls is, what is your role? You know, oh, you're a parent? Oh, wow, great, thanks for volunteering, and sort of building that relationship. And then once they understand that there's a larger picture, and then they see, oh, there's a contribution agreement, oh, there's this, you know, the dominoes, then the concern starts to fade back. Does that help?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that helps a lot.
Okay.
Just making sure that those hearing also get that same information.
Yes.
Yep, so I want to go back to the PTO. Do we have any PTOs right now that don't have a licensed insurance and aren't using our schools, or are they all
All of
approved
them.
and now they're all using our schools and
They're
they're in
all,
good shape?
yes.
Okay.
Yep, and once they understand, and whether it's PTOs or it's any non-district sponsored group, once it's reviewed that there is a state statute in place that for using our facilities, number one, we want to follow the legal lines of the law.
Yep.
But number two, we need to protect the district.
Yep.
That, I mean, that's what my job and my number one job is charged with is liabilities, and then that's my job. And to do that, that means that, number one, they have to have their insurance, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, so if there's no further questions, the board will look forward to hearing the update in the spring, on hearing about how those credits have went, and, yeah, just giving an update, that'd be great. So we'll move on to item C, which is the student management procedures, and that's Dave May.
Thanks for having us here tonight to talk about this. In some ways, this is a little back to the future, so it was about 13 months ago that we talked to the board at the time on the same topic. We were at a different point in time at that juncture, and so this gives us a kind of a second bite at this, and I appreciate the time to do it. I'm going to kind of set the table into what Megan and I walked into, and then I'll introduce Megan to kind of take it from there for a little bit. But when we arrived on the scene, both Megan and I were hired at the same time. We arrived last July. And I believe, and Judy and those that were on the board, correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, like the board had just gone through a season in the spring that had some information had come from the public about needing some procedures in place to maybe better assure them that we are following some processes that would be in line with policy, that would assure them that we're following our bullying and harassment, things like that, correct?
They were taking issue with our bullying and harassment policies because they were not consistently being held accountable across the district to implement them.
Okay.
So the ask was to put something into place from the board, that the board could make sure that there was consistent district application and accountability at every building.
Perfect, thank you.
And I think they also they hadn't been updated for a while, so they wanted them updated.
Okay. Well, so in one of the first meetings that we sat down at, and I think Emily was there too, we had heard that. And then we had also heard from the technology department that we needed to have some consistency because we have to do our DERS reporting every year, which, and I always forget that, it is disciplinary incident reporting system. I remember a lot of acronyms, that one does not stick in my head. And then principals wanted to have a behavior matrix where they're able to like basically go down and over and say, all right, this behavior equals this consequence. And so I remember Megan and I leaving a couple of meetings going, you guys want this when? Like this seems like much bigger work than just, hey, we need to get some behaviors addressed. We need to have consequences defined. Like there's a whole section there that we're missing in terms of like what our response is as a district, because as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, behavior is just communication. In most cases, the response part of how we're gonna work with kids on a daily basis is what counts. And very little were we hearing at the time about like, what do we know about how we're working with kids, how we're responding to the behaviors that they're demonstrating to us, and what work have we done with those leaders in those buildings to make sure that we are doing that work. So we asked if we could like maybe pause or take a little bit of a time out to maybe address this a little bit differently. Megan had some ideas as she came to the table. Being a former principal at the middle school level and now being the director of MTSS, we figured this was a really nice window to start working with our leaders to learn more about how they were addressing social emotional learning, how they were addressing behavior, what they were thinking was they were having staff pressures be put on them as well. So right away, I kind of handed this off to Megan, and Megan had a vision for how she might work with these groups and cohorts, and I'll let you kind of take it from there on how this kind of went from there.
Yeah, I'm gonna just first kind of lay the stage for what I want to share with you guys today. I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail what we came to the table to learn was first happening in our district, because we had some really good things in place. And then how, in my new role as the director of MTSS, we needed to create some systems. It was really about connecting all those things to make sure they were working together. And then the third thing is I'm going to talk through the involvement that all of our administrators, both at the school level and the district level, had in creating that system that we really now have in place. They have put in hours of time working on this, both in giving feedback on what we originally created and in going through all of our procedures, and then finally, and probably the most important, having really good professional conversations and learning around what we needed to be aware of and conscious of in our practice when we were in the buildings, working with our kids that are in our buildings every single day.
And it's still evolving and still happening.
Yes, it is still happening. In fact, we've got in a few weeks a steering committee meeting coming up where we're now going to start looking at data, which is really exciting, that we can look at data and make some good decisions about, proactive decisions about what do we need to do in our buildings. So I'm going to rewind us back to the beginning because I think that's really important for us to understand. So you guys shared a little bit about what the board was hearing. When I got to the table, one of the things that I quickly learned is we had done a lot of work around our SEL framework, a lot of really, really good work around our SEL framework. And so here in Lakeville, that framework is, first of all, that environmental expectations. What most of our schools have done is they've adopted PBIS as that framework. They were in different places. Elementaries had 8 out of 9 had adopted it. All of them had the components of PBIS in them. Lakeville South is in their second year of the cohort. It's a 2-year cohort with MDE, which is really good free professional development that they provide. And then the other four secondary buildings were in their first year of PBIS.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is PBIS?
That's a great question. PBIS, and if I use other acronyms, please stop me. PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Systems.
Okay.
And it's really, the core of that is you define your expectations in the building, you positively reinforce what you want to see, and you specifically define and address what you don't want to see,
Okay.
what we want to eliminate in our environments.
So then is it like an accredited kind of methodology that has been, you know, tested and true, and like
Yeah.
how is that ranked against other methodologies? I don't know, I'm just asking because I'm just
Yeah.
here at PBIS, it's the first time, so.
PBIS is a state-sponsored, research-based framework that many, many schools across the state and actually across the entire nation use. It is not a prescribed process or certain things. It is a professional development framework in which the teams come in and they develop what that means to their school. And schools can only participate in a PBIS cohort if a certain percentage of their staff agree to supporting PBIS.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when did Lakeville adopt that?
Various times. So our elementaries, when I arrived, were all there. Lakeville South was in their second year, so this would have been last fall. And the other 4 secondary buildings were in the first of 2 years of their cohort. In fact, they just hosted a meeting here with 3 other districts today, and they have 2 more meetings left with those state facilitators.
It's not unusual for a school district to phase it in at different parts across the district, either be elementaries in one cohort and then do secondaries later, or some version of that.
But the maturity level of its adoption varies within the schools.
Yeah. What I can tell you is by the end of this year, all of our buildings that we have students in will be a PBIS school. Yep. And that is work that was done through our SEL framework. The second piece of the SEL framework is a core curriculum. You guys all heard last year that elementary has adopted Character Strong, and so that is an in-process piece of our SEL framework right now. And the third piece of it is what we call EMR, which is Establish, Maintain, and Restore. That's all about those relationships we have with kids on a daily basis, as we work through really hard things with them. We have to have that relationship to be able to work through those things. And there are really specific, different practices that you can do around EMR, and our SEL work has brought some of those forward to staff, and we still have work to do in that area. We need to continue to look at some of the best practices and how are we training our staff on those. So SEL work has a great start. It's not done. I don't know if it will ever be done, to be completely honest. It's something that's always in process. A couple other things that we had in place that's important to know is we have EduClimber here in the district. EduClimber is a data warehouse that is something that most often our teachers use. And we had to work through that a little bit last year because both teachers and administrators were using it at different levels and in different various capabilities around behavior and what we were documenting. So one of our first goals was we have to have accurate and clear data coming out of this so we can make decisions and we can truly see what's happening with our kids and how we're making those decisions. It was great that we had it. I can tell you, having worked around student management from the high school and the middle school level, this is something that other districts try to figure out through Google Sheets or work around inside their SIS to try and figure out how they're going to document this. Having EduClimber has been a huge plus for us in being able to collect that data.
Not just having it, but also making sure that people are clear what minor behaviors are being logged in EduClimber, defining what those are, and I know you're going to get that in just a little bit, but also having major behaviors logged in our student information system. As Megan hinted at, we had varying degrees of that happening all over the district, and it was no small undertaking to kind of make sure that that was consistently applied. So this year, with that consistent application, we should have maybe more of our baseline year and what we can see our behavior data being as we're moving forward, whereas maybe that in the past, if we look in a comparison, is going to be unreliable somewhat because people were logging in various places.
That's a question.
Are you good?
So I know,
Sorry, I was pointing to you.
so something like that. I know when we were reviewing things to cut last year, some of these application things came up. So EduClimber is something that probably is worth the investment or the cost, given how much more
Very
efficient
strongly, yes.
Yes.
it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We use it for more than just behavior. I think the important thing to point out there is it also gives teachers almost a information sheet on a student that includes all of their universal screening around academics. It includes the behavior. It will pull in their attendance, and then it will track any interventions and intervention notes that come from the intervention teams. And that is still being developed in different capacities. So I'm going to talk only about how we're putting behavior in it today, but just so you know, from an intervention standpoint, it is an extremely
It's very
powerful tool.
comprehensive.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
So to confirm, all infractions are going into EduClimber?
Nope, and I'll define that here in just a second. So no, but for, it's important when we start talking about how we are going to help teach around behavior. So I'm going to use an example here, right? If a child can't read, what do? We teach them, right? If a child can't do a math skill, what do? We teach them. Child doesn't know how to tie their shoes, we teach them. We need to, when we see behaviors happening, not move straight to punishment, but have the system in place to be able to teach first as well. We really want to have a system there to be able to do that teachable teaching moment with our kids, with the goal being we see less of the major behaviors and the things that I know were coming to you guys a couple years ago in the buildings.
Who does the teaching?
So our teachers and our administrators in the building, those adults that are around those kids all day, every single day in our buildings. So let me talk about the structure we put in place. So up on the screen here, I just want to orient you guys to this. And then we are going to move into the major behaviors because that's the work that our administrators are focused on when it comes to them. But we did work with our PBIS coaches. There's one in every building. They are not always, but typically teachers. And some of them may be deans. It depends on the building and who's taken on that role. To go through and define what our minor behaviors were. keep in mind, those teams all had done that work in their PBIS cohort. So we were taking almost 18 sites at the time and trying to sort through what they had defined as minor behaviors. And then to the data piece, major behaviors need to go into our campus, which is our SIS. EduClimber and campus talk to each other. And when they talk to each other, they cannot use the same word, or we cannot distinguish between if it was a minor or a major behavior. So when you see what's up here, that's why you will not see any of the same words on each side of this, which is a learning curve, because I will tell you, they were using some of the words that were major behaviors for minor behaviors, and just the system of us trying to make sure we have clearly defined what are the behaviors and how do you decide between the different ones, if it's minor, major, or where it lands. So this went out to everyone. The other thing to know, and then I'm going to move on to major behaviors, is these PBIS teams in the buildings, and all the details on this isn't stuff that we need to dig into right now, but what I want you to know is those PBIS teams have created flow charts for their staff to know if it's a minor behavior, here are the ways you can address this, here's where this can go. Here are what our minor behaviors are. We're teaching around those in our buildings. And then if it is a major behavior, this is your process to get it to the office. So it's an office managed behavior. Okay, this is just one example. This is, every building built this in their PBIS cohorts. So this is something that comes out of PBIS. They all have a version of this that is unique to their building. A couple of the things that were in place already, we had the threat assessment process in place already when I started. Our administrators were working with Holly Ryan and Lisa Holine on that process. We also had a reporting system in place, and this was legislation through that bullying act that came through. We were using P3 at the time. We now use Stop It. It's the same anonymous tip reporting system for us to get those anonymous tips. Those go directly to our principals and administrators' inboxes on their computers, and some of them, I think if they are not tagged to a specific school, go to Holly or Lisa, so that somebody is responding to those anonymous tips.
And actually, we have Holly and Lisa working after hours to monitor the anonymous reporting after hours and on the weekends as well. And so that if anything comes up that's alarming at night or on the weekends, they are mobilized and they help mobilize other people to respond.
Yep. So all of that to say, we had all this stuff going on, and then the other data piece was we had to report, this is a requirement, we have to report to the state on this DERS report our suspensions every year. And they analyze that to see what are we suspending for, who are we suspending, and they ask a lot of questions about that. And they can come back to us and say, hey, you are suspending at too high of a rate in different categories of students, and then we have to correct that. We have not been told that, so we're in a good place right now. And I think us having data now that we can look at is going to help us make sure we're being intentional with our response to behavior.
So what kind of reports go into DERS?
Well,
Minors or majors?
It's anything we suspend on, so that's a major
suspension.
behavior no matter what. The only people who can suspend are your administrators.
Got it.
Yep, so that is always a major behavior.
And that's being tracked not in EduClimber, but a
In
different tool
campus.
in campus.
Some of it was in EduClimber previously, and that was inappropriate and directed sometimes by teachers. Now it's completely at the office level with administrators handled only in campus.
So the data issue last year was we had that information all over the place. Some
Got
was
it.
in EduClimber, some was in campus, some was being, I think even just entered by the incorrect person, not necessarily that had happened by the incorrect person, but it was not clear and concise, and so when we went to run that report, it was not coming out of our system accurate.
Got it. So
That
minors
makes
are
sense.
in EduClimber, majors are in campus.
Yes.
And just out of curiosity, what's the percentage, like if there was 100 incidents, what's the percentage of them that are considered major, based on the initial reports or data that you have?
I don't have that comparison in front of me. I mean, I
Oh.
can ask that. I'd have to go pull it
Our data
out.
person can pull it
Yeah.
That's fine.
probably.
I was
I
just
don't
curious.
even want to ballpark it.
I know, I mean, hopefully less than like 1%, maybe, I don't know.
We hope.
Okay.
Okay, so this is where we were at last year. We were tasked with having some sort of guidelines to be able to go into the school year last year with. So in August, we sat down with a steering committee, which included some representation from our administrators, district administrators, and we put together around the DERS reportable events, I'm gonna go back to here, some guidelines. And that's your major office behaviors. Those are all the DERS. They are defined for us by the state. These are your major behaviors.
So can I ask a
Yep.
question related to this? Looking at these behaviors, like I do see some that are related to bullying, but I'm assuming that you have like a separate procedure for students that can report bullying or how it's handled, especially given that we have social media that, you know, results from bullying. Those are just the emails we seem to get a lot from community members that are focusing on the bullying that students are experiencing. So could you speak a little bit to that too?
Yeah, and so we did look at that along with other things in this cohort. So after defining these and having the document ready for the year, our administrators came together every month for 8 months. We ran 3 different cohorts all year long where we looked at different things. One entire month was focused on bullying and our procedures around how do we address that. We had to look at legislation as well because there's new legislation out there around how that's addressed. So there are things like certain investigation questions we need to ask. We wrote very specific initial screening investigations. So you get the tip in the office or a student comes in. There are screening questions now that help the administrators ask specific questions about, where should I go with this? Is there an imminent threat? Should I contact and do a threat assessment? We don't want them wasting time with a whole nother investigation if we need to go straight there. It will ask questions about bullying and harassment. Title IX, which is sexual harassment, again, we need to go straight to our sexual harassment, our Title IX coordinator to get that support. So we wrote those questions so that they could quickly screen out what this was and how they were going to address that. And so one of those was the bullying and harassment. If they go to that, there's a whole protocol with the letters that they need to send and all the different pieces that need to happen there. Other things we covered, I'm seeing here. Oh, I do want you guys to know that before we started last school year, that even though it was in draft form, it went to legal counsel. Our legal counsel has seen this document, all of these documents twice to give us, that they could support what we were having people do. They did give us feedback. We made changes to the verbiage. For example, in there sometimes it doesn't give a range of days of suspension. It says up to. Because we're really trying to provide that ability for our administrators to have the discretion based on the student's needs to do what's right for that student and also to continue to promote learning with that student and create a safe environment. So we went through that. I already covered a number of those things. Every administrator was given the opportunity through the cohort to provide feedback on both our responses and our disciplinary actions. I'm going to show you that really quickly because I think this is one of the things that's really important. Dave talked about a matrix where it just tells you what the consequences might be, and we really wanted to focus also on that we were responding appropriately before moving straight to consequence. So every behavior in here has a definition, a title and a definition. It then, for elementary, middle, and high school, talks about what are our responses we could have. This is the taking care of every child in that situation, and then what are the disciplinary actions that are an option. So responses is something that we had a lot of conversation about, even the bullying and harassment. What is the protocol? How do we respond to that? We defined all those also. So we defined every one of our responses so that people were because I will tell you these definitions were not consistent. And we defined all of the different disciplinary actions. This was key to get our data clean. If we didn't have that clean and consistent, our data that we're putting into campus was not going to be clean. So all of those pieces were defined. Fast forward to this spring and the new legislation that came out, which really, people were anxious about that. What I will say, the intent of that legislation does align really well with the work our administrators did last year. We were in a really good place to make sure that we could meet the intent of that new legislation. There were pieces of it that, and I think and we know that there's still pieces of it that we need to do more PD and learning around and having conversations in our buildings because it is impacting our classrooms every single day. But from a lot of the logistical pieces, having to be able to print off every non-exclusionary discipline thing we've done for a child, having to track recess detentions, there was just a lot of those pieces. We were in a position that isn't even, we were done. It's ready to go. We've got that stuff in there.
It was almost as if, like, most districts were in the position we were in a year ago, but with a quick turnaround timeline from like June to September to get something like this all put together when we had spent the previous year doing it. So we had the advantage of just being able to tweak our guidelines a little bit based off of the new legislation, but not having to start from scratch the way that most districts had to.
So I mentioned our steering committee. They've been vital in this. They've come in to plan each of those cohorts last year. They came in for a full day this summer to review the legislative changes around non-exclusionary discipline. We reviewed what work we had done on all the guidelines and procedures, made necessary edits to that, sent it to legal counsel, and then that group and a couple of administrators from that group presented to all of the principals during our summer principals meeting to help get them in a good place of understanding what that legislation was. I will say it's impactful to their job, and so a lot of them have attended other things, and I think we are getting to the point where we've had a lot of conversations about it, and we're going to start to, it's going to start to kind of settle in with where we're at. Data stuff, the data that's coming in, what we can see, and just so you guys know what's there, our teachers can see their minor behaviors, so PLCs can look at those, they can see what minor behaviors are happening with their group of kids. They can see the number of major behaviors. Because major behaviors, as you saw on that list, some of them fall under significant data privacy restrictions. We do not say what they were, it's just a number of how many major behaviors, because those teachers who are working with those kids every single day in the classroom have the best opportunity to do some tier 1 supports with those kids and do supports across their entire classroom if they're seeing something that is off or that they need to address with their kids. Our buildings can see the behavior data they have a data visualization inside campus, so they can see all of that data for their building. It is broken down by demographic, incident, responses, and disciplinary action. And you will be able to see a lot of that from a district level on the dashboard. We're going to show you that here in just a second. And so that allows them, even from a tier 1 support from a building, to look at and see what's happening, where is things happening, what can we do? For example, if the hallways seem to be a place where a lot of stuff is happening, well, that gives us data to say, how can we support kids out in the hallway? So we've done really great work. We're gonna now start to dig into what does the data tell us so that we can start to make some of those really important decisions within the building.
Yeah, and I think it'll be good just having access to, especially to the majors and the numbers. Those kids are just begging for some adult relationship interaction, and that's probably one of the best avenues that our SROs have always played, is coming in and developing some relationships with those kids and really helping them get on the right track, because, I mean, they're just on the borderline of always being on the wrong side of the track. And our teachers and our SROs in partnership with the relationships that they develop with some of those kids, it's, for me now, I know who some of those kids are, and those relationships just change their lives, and they're just really productive, involved, good human beings. But seeing those majors are really important to know who needs relationship building.
And speaking of the SROs, that is something we focused on with the SROs, is that relationship piece, Judy. And also that was one of the key pieces of legal advice we got a year ago too, is to make sure that from a disciplinary standpoint, and that even came into a bigger focus this year with some of those legislative issues too, that the SROs are not part of the disciplinary pieces unless a crime's involved. So
Yeah.
we are trying to keep them away from that unless a crime
They
or
don't want to
potential
be
crime's
brought
involved.
in because
Right.
they have to look at it from the legal lens.
Right.
And so they want to be there to build relationships. They don't want to be called into
Right.
somebody that has a disciplinary issue because they now have to put their legal hat on.
Yep.
So I've got I wrote a few notes, so I've got 3 separate questions. One, does the data that's available in EduClimber and also in Campus, is it role access, meaning like if the principal at North shouldn't have access to the students, and if they have a major or minor for students who might be in South? Like those who have access to that particular student would have access to that information, is that accurate?
So it's by rosters of teacher, and the principal has building access.
Perfect.
But it does not extend beyond that.
Okay. And then for teacher impact, I keep hearing, so I'm hearing PBIS, and there's one in every classroom, or not in every classroom, but in the school. Just curious, like the level of effort for this. I just keep hearing, are we adding another thing to a teacher's plate? Or is this something that they're already doing in some capacity? We're just structurizing it, we're structuring it.
We're giving it a system. I think if you talk to any teacher, they have to have classroom management.
Yep.
They have to be able to address that within their classroom. So we're giving them a system to be able to do that, and for us as an entire system, either building or district, to look at where are the trends and what is happening so we can support it. It is challenging to be in a classroom, some of them with a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And to have to manage all those different behaviors and things that they're bringing to the table. But that has to happen first before learning can take place.
Some do it naturally.
Yes.
I was gonna say-
But now it's also as she was saying, a system in which if I'm in 3rd grade, I'm going to hear the same language in 4th grade. And that's part of the learning process. It's not Kim and I teach differently. She calls something one thing and I call something different when we're talking about discipline or behavior. It's the same language of, here's how we should walk down the hallway, here's what it's like in the restroom, in the classroom, here's how we're gonna treat each other, be respectful, something
that's being
happens.
tracked.
Yep. So all those things are a component that the people who did it well probably aren't saying, hey, this is something extra. The people who maybe struggle and it's not natural, it's a learning professional development, but it also probably seems like something else that they're learning, because I think as you're hearing in the last with facilities use and this, unless you have a systems approach, we have a hodgepodge of stuff going on, and that creates that inconsistency.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. The system's only as good as those who are implementing it,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
so,
Garbage in, garbage out.
so we've created a system and able for us to track that. We've got to then, the best conversations that are happening is around, what have we taught around this? Have we redirected it? When do we put in that minor behavior? I mean, that's a real struggle for our teachers, because some of them naturally just intervene
Yeah.
and don't think about, I need to go document it.
Yep.
And then you can sometimes have the other side where I want to document all of it, and it's great, yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, also, I know you said that PBIS is new to you, it's not new to the field. So
Okay.
like, it's not something that just came along in the last couple of years. PBIS has been around for a while, tested, research-based, and sponsored by MDE, so much so that like many districts are using it. So we could have students that leave our district, go to another, and as Doug said, like common
Same framework.
languages, common routines.
Mhm.
They might have different keywords that they're using in their buildings or whatever, but it's same similar framework.
So my last question then, I'm sure there's a bunch more here. Parental notification. So every time an EduClimber ticket is submitted, do parents get alerted when that happens, or do they receive a phone call?
They should be receiving a phone call from the teacher.
Okay.
Because that partnership is incredibly important. If we're going to document something, that means everyone should be part of that teaching
Yep.
opportunity. Yeah.
Appreciate that, thank you. And for someone else, I received a phone call recently, so.
Call or email.
Yeah, or email, and so I appreciated the phone call, and so.
About yourself?
No, about one of mine.
About you.
What about one of mine?
Yeah, that's not a
But 100%, that reinforces, because, hey, what happened? Tell me your side of the story, and then I can have the conversation when someone else comes home and say, hey, tell me your side of the story, and so that there's alignment. So again, parent notification, whether it's a minor or if it's on campus, and then based on the teachers who make submissions or entries. Okay, great.
That's yours.
Terry, I see your hand.
Go ahead.
We should just rotate
Um,
around.
Probably, if you talk to teachers today, probably the biggest stress factor is the behavior in the classroom, which has changed dramatically since pre-COVID days. And it seems like this is going to fit, or is working, to meet that need. Because if you don't have the classroom atmosphere for education, the kids are not going to learn. So you need to deal with this in a systematic way, which you've developed. Some teachers are natural at it, some they need assistance, and you're providing that. And to me, that's probably one of the most important things you can do this year, I feel. Because you've got to get that atmosphere, that behavior under control, and the kids that are self-regulating themselves before education can happen. So thanks.
Thanks, Terry.
So I guess my question is, data's great, as long as you have the time to look through it and pick apart, like, to look for patterns of behavior. How do we address these? And when I think about a teacher and how much time they have during the day, I appreciated your response where you're saying that some of this is happening during PLCs, but then also thinking about all that data that's coming into that one program. So you would have academic data, all of those different facets. You would need to have like a pretty well-rounded team when you're talking about a student to understand how that all those specific data points impact the behavior of that child, because there's so much that goes into that whole child approach. So how are you organizing that or facilitating that, kind of like a teaming approach for some students that are really struggling to pick apart that data and to support the teams that are working with children that are having those types of struggles?
Well, you have gotten right at the heart of what MTSS is right there. You know, so one of the subcomponents of MTSS is collaboratively linked teams. And honestly, that starts all the way from a district oversight to your tier 3 design and implementation team in a building. We are working on that. Again, I'm going to tell you, we've got a lot of really good things in place. There are things happening in our building, and it's all now trying to tie all that together into a system. So we have PLC time built in for teachers. I know that we are asking a lot of that time, so I don't know that it is always enough time for them. But there is a time there where they can look at it, and that is for tier 1 implementation. So that's looking at a large group, what is something we can do across our system for that whole group to see a change in that. If they have individual students or a group of students, now we're talking tier 2 and tier 3 interventions.
Which would be like your building support team, I'm sure that you have.
Absolutely, yep. So we've got, in some buildings right now, they're calling them an intervention support team, an IST, others call it, like at South is the Cougar support team, they have different acronyms for it.
Makes sense.
So they can then refer, and that's what's in EduClimber, is then all of that is tracked in the referral for those students to those teams.
Right.
Is made, those teams have the time, there often are school counselors, our student support specialists, our school psychs. We have some access behavior interventionists, our deans. They all sit around the table then, and they may bring a teacher in, or one of the teachers or the teacher of that child, to talk about what are we seeing and what is it we can do now to support that child.
Thank you. Yeah, I
so-
appreciate that, because I'm thinking about like all the things that a teacher has to do during the day, and this is another very important component to help a child be academically successful. They've got to have the time to do it, right? And we're thinking, how are we pulling all of this from a teacher's day? So thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think some of our buildings are doing a really good job of some of those planning meetings, and some of the buildings maybe not so much. So I mean, Megan, Carol, and I are studying that this year in terms of those intervention planning teams and those processes. But also something that you hit on, Kim, too. Like one thing Lakeville's been good at is like having lots of good things that we do, but sometimes good things get in the way of good things. That's something that a friend of mine said to me at one point, and that means that we have to prioritize some of what we do. And so to what Terry was saying too, if we're going to want our kids to progress well and have some of the behaviors be reduced, we actually have to help the students feel adjusted and well, and to have a sense of belonging and to feel comfortable and to have those relationships be built. And the academic won't come until we do that, so we have to make sure that those priorities are there.
Okay. Dave, did you have a question?
took so long to get to me, I forgot it.
Well, and then we have to come back to
Got a good memory, but
Go
it's
ahead.
short.
And
I was joking, don't start, don't start. Go ahead, Carly.
Oh, I mean, I think part of this too, I want to acknowledge there's a lot to review in terms of what you guys sent us, and so, thank you for sending all that. So one quick question, how long does it take to, because my concern is actually not necessarily about the major obvious behaviors, but all the minor things that are perhaps more insidious and affect a child, like a child who's being targeted. So how long does it take for anyone, can anyone in the system report a minor behavior?
So currently, a teacher who they're rostered to has access to them. In buildings who have a need, so like elementaries in some situations have an office manager who has access to all kids, so that then if, let's say something happens at recess, or that person can help enter. Others say that needs to go back to the classroom teacher to close the loop around that teacher's involvement in that. So it depends on what system they've set up for PBIS, but those minors, how long does that take? It's really fast. It's a pull-down menu. You find the student pull-down menu, you choose the behavior. There's a small note section. We actually ask them less is more sometimes in those situations. Just brief. And then they have some resolutions they pick from. Honestly, the most time-consuming part of that is probably the contact home.
Yeah.
The communication home with families and the conversation that they need to have. If it's an email or a phone call, that's what's taking time. And so I think that's where the conversations with teachers comes in around, we naturally will redirect and teach. When does it reach the need to document that as a minor behavior? The first time we redirect doesn't mean we have to document that as a minor behavior. We need to do our teaching before we get to that point. And that's still a teachable moment. It's just a little bit bigger teachable moment because now we're gonna contact home and we wanna have that documented.
So my question goes back to where we started.
I
with
was next.
the- Well,
You
well,
forgot.
yeah,
You
so that's a
remember?
I
conversation.
also had
Forgot.
Go
one
ahead.
more question.
I was just gonna ask, so getting back to where we originally started, is do we have, do you feel that there's consistency and accountability at the building level to make sure this is done and done correctly and fairly for the child?
Yeah, I feel like we have a consistency in our process when I come in. That's what seemed to be maybe lacking before in terms of like what, not that people weren't doing good things, because I think they were, but I think that they now have a consistent, set of procedures or guidelines to follow to be able to execute this properly. In terms of the accountability, I think it's too soon to tell a little bit, because we're just now laying out like how these things are being followed and where we're noticing if they're being followed, not being followed, and then what do we do
But the
next?
clear expectations is they will be accountable.
Yeah, yes.
Dave,
Is it my turn?
You
Are you
guys,
gonna go?
work sessions are supposed to be open dialogue.
Are you gonna go?
Are you gonna?
Dave, do you have a question?
So go ahead, Bree.
Okay, how long, okay, so we've just kind of started this new process this year. It's,
Last year we piloted it.
okay, so you're kind of in your, okay, so you're
Kind of
your
built
pilot.
like the whole plastic, like flying the airplane.
Yep.
Thing, yeah.
Yep, so how long do you think it'll take to check the accountability? Like, is there 1 year, 2 years? I think you have a lot to go through. I mean, I know exactly what you do in the class, what the teachers do every day in the classroom and what happens. It could take, a really long time, in some cases.
Yeah, and it's somewhat situational in
Yeah.
terms of like how we find out about, like, in terms of like where our natural point of entry is in a situation that may involve a behavior where we can find out in that situation, how is it being followed. There are other times where maybe a parent or maybe a staff member will call us with concerns and there's a reason to dive into it. So we have to develop on top of those two things, ways that maybe we can do dipstick tests as like every so often to be able to tell like more objectively when we're not involved in it, how do we tell if these things are all being done.
And the data's gonna be important here
Yeah.
too. So as our steering committee comes together, first of all, those are administrators in the building. So they're gonna come with questions and things that are happening and feedback on what needs to be addressed or what supports need to be in place. And they're gonna look at data where we can really look at what is actually happening?
Yeah.
So that we can have that conversation, and data holds us accountable. So I think that's another important piece to note about.
So in the essence of time,
I just
because
have
we're
a-
like way over on time.
You're not cutting me off.
For this
I get
topic.
that one small
Um,
question.
I think this is a great thing that we need to bring back, but I also know that you still have to talk about the dashboard. So you've asked a
will be
lot of
fast,
questions.
I promise.
I'm gonna go to Dave and let
But-
Dave ask a question, and then,
I forgot.
please tell me you did.
Okay, so what are we, this is pretty simple, and I don't mean to be huge, but, so, special ed teachers get piled on with IEP paperwork anyways, because I've been involved in a lot of those meetings and paperwork. So are we gonna help them at all, because this is extra on top of that?
This would not be extra on top of that. So, like, as we are talking about kids in IEPs, we are talking about planning for doing functional behavioral assessments, which is something they would always be doing, and doing either a behavior intervention plan or a positive behavior support plan, which would work right with this. So, that's not.
Dave, I actually see this as like really good. When we get to the process of like determining if a student needs a special ed evaluation, you're gonna have all of this data
Yeah.
prior to that to show that interventions took place before
Yeah.
you decided. So I see it as great.
If anything, what the procedures and the guidelines do for the administrators is remind them of how the disability can play a role and or what protections are in place, as well as they're considering different disciplinary measures for students on IEP.
I just am sensitive that they have a lot of paper.
Yeah, they do have a lot of people. You're right.
Do you want me to,
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, your minors have different categories, right? Subcategories, like small, medium, large, so it's not like it's one minor. What? Do we already, oh, I haven't, I'm
No,
sorry.
I
don't
think
know.
many of us have a lot of questions
Yeah.
that we will just
Well,
address
I mean,
another time.
the educate
So-
present session would be great, so we can.
the minor behaviors are, there's not really levels of minor behaviors. It is just if you've addressed something, and as a teacher, maybe multiple times, maybe I've redirected a couple of times, and that student still is not showing me that they are understanding or learning or changing that behavior, then I may choose to document this and contact home, and provide another learning opportunity for that student. Minor behaviors are all classroom managed. So if they start to see a lot of them, or consistent, and the same ones over and over again, that becomes, back to what Kim asked about an intervention team, now we gotta start, behavior tells us something. So if we've intervened multiple times and that's not changing, what's happening here? Like, what else do we need to do to wrap around the student to support them, so that it doesn't become a major behavior? When you look at those major behaviors, those are things that like, often instantly go to the office. Like they're not anything we would ask our teachers to address in the classroom. And those administrators are on those intervention teams. So they're still part of that whole process around what are we gonna do to wrap around this kid that we're seeing multiple minors in.
All right, so it sounds like we are really into this topic. And we would love to have more information around this and maybe more discussion. But just like I said, in the essence of time, let's skip on to item D, which is the dashboard update, which you're doing.
What I would say is, I sent you that email, so if you have some questions that you want, if you would send them in advance to Dave and Megan, that helps them not have to shoot from the hip or from, so if you look at this, you see some information, you have some specific questions, probably put that together so that they can have that and we can bring them back with some of those things, either already answered in a Friday update to you or as part of another work session.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so data dashboard. So my team, Cheryl Gingler is on my team. She's the one who does the updating of this data dashboard. Her and I then look at it together to make sure that we're presenting accurate data to all of you. So I'm just going to share what's been updated on here. The demographics has not been updated. These were the October 1st demographics you've seen. So those
You
are
keep
still-
those running all year, right? Or do you update them?
Yeah, it's October 1st is our
Yeah, it's our official count.
our cutoff by the state. So
Yeah, and you keep that.
yep, so that'll stay that way.
Yeah.
So yes, the demographics will not change
Yeah.
now for the
Yeah.
rest of the year. Attendance has been updated. You can see where our attendance is at for October on here, both for students, staff, paraprofessionals. The first one is by month. And then the second here is by day of the week, and where our attendance is at. And then by demographics. Okay. Next one is our major behaviors. And where we're at with those for the month of October.
How'd homecoming week look at each
Well,
school?
you know,
Don't
September
answer.
tends to be a honeymoon.
Don't answer.
So some of this stuff, like you will see other on there, we're working through how we choose, again, working directly with admin teams around what is being documented and how it's being documented. And that's one that I think is, we're actually digging into that to find out why that's popped up on there, because we're not using it all the time. So you can see what our top 5 incidences are and our top 5 responses. I do want to point out, because I think this just shows our work towards non-exclusionary discipline. Suspension was on the top of it the last time you saw this. Administrative conference and parent and guardian conferences is now the top 2 responses. These are things that our administrators were doing before. We weren't tracking it. And so we were only putting suspensions into campus. Now with the non-exclusionary discipline legislation, we have to track all those steps we take before we get to that suspension. And so they are entering all of those different steps and responses that they take. Okay, so this will start to give you an idea of the work they are doing with kids before they reach that point of suspending them.
Why would there be a non-response?
So actually, we think that's an error in our, so sometimes they didn't attach a resolution, but
Okay.
actually we're finding sometimes it's popping up as none, but there was a resolution. We have our database person working on that.
because I was
So,
gonna say, that's
good
weird.
question. I asked the same one, we're
Okay.
working on that. I don't think that's gonna stay there.
Okay. Yeah.
That's where we were
Sounds
at.
good.
This is your demographics, incidents by race and then by grade. You can see, currently middle school is seeing the most incidences. What I will tell you here is to keep in mind, this includes all that non-exclusionary discipline. This is not number of students by race that are suspended. This is every single time we do something with a child to help them, okay? Or to do a redirection or a parent conference or something. There may be a response in there. Okay. Then we've got academics. Universal screeners have not been updated because we've only taken our fall universal screeners. So that will happen here early January for our winter, and then we'll update those. Interventions have been updated. And I just want to point out and highlight something. You will start to see interventions for 8th grade populate on here. We have started 8th grade reading at 2 buildings in a math tier 2 intervention for students, and we will be progress monitoring those in EduClimber so that it populates so we can start to see how those interventions are happening. And then these are the academics. Those have been updated as well. This is for middle school on the left, high school on the right. The middle school number, a couple of things I just want to draw your attention to. The point where what these data points were drawn was the first week of the second term, and 2 of those courses on there are second term courses. That means those kids have maybe turned in 1 assignment. And so if you didn't turn in that 1 assignment, you were failing the class, okay? And that's your literacy and your health 6. And so the next data point, which will be more in the middle of a term, will give us a better view of this. But because that term had just rolled over, that's why we see those 2 courses showing up on there. High school was at the end of a quarter, so that's accurate. There's always a story with data. Yes. And that's what we got for you. That's what's updated on the dashboard today.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so have no more questions on that one, right, for right now? Okay, all right. So we'll move on to item E, which is the fiscal year 24 budget update. It's Bill.
Yeah, he's gonna pass.
State your retort.
I don't know.
Oh, you're not together, just pass it. Good extras. Okay, just an update on the budget and trying to bring forms to the board that I think are useful. So these are our October numbers, we just got them taken care of today. So on the very front page, this is just a snapshot of where we are with actual revenue in, expenditures out, split by fund. So way on the left side, that's just everything put together. You can see how the general fund is split out, so you can see that we're spending less than we're bringing in, so that's always a good thing. You'll see a red number in Fund 2. We haven't received any revenue yet for this year. We are having a small issue with the software, so it's gonna be a little delayed. We have a big meeting on Friday to get that taken care of. So that's why you're seeing a negative number, just because we don't have the revenue yet. So I think it's a good snapshot. I think if you look at that graph in the bottom right-hand corner, I think you get a good idea of how we have to deal with our revenue that just bounces up and down, you know. So every month doesn't always look positive because of the way the revenue comes in. You go to this second page, this will give you a pretty good idea of what we expect to happen on a monthly basis when it comes to our revenue and expenditures. And as we go through the year, then you'll see the actuals come into play. So you see October now, our actuals there. Excuse me. So you can see there also that we, from the beginning of our cash position, from the beginning of the year at a little over 11 million, now we're at about 12.4. So matches up with that front page. So just gives you a pretty good idea of what we expect to happen. On the third page, here, we'll have some information here actually against our budget. So the very first column is a prior year, year to date, so that's our October numbers from last year, and then our current numbers for this year. So you see the change. So last year, we were lagging, and they were about $2 million. This year, we're up over $1 million in the general fund. And then we have the projections we put in. Now, this system looks at our last 3 years and looks at how we've spent our money and does some projections on what we think is going to happen for the rest of the year. So you have then a forecast and an annual budget. So you can see that at this point in time, on the expenditure side, we're actually under budget by quite a bit, but I would just want to remind everybody that we're not necessarily under budget for the year because we haven't settled all our union contracts. So at this point, we haven't increased any salaries from the year before. So we are spending about 2.25% less at this point in time than we did last year, which I would expect, and that as we go through the year, it's going to come back. But we're favorable in pretty much in all categories at this point. Everything is looking normal. What I did then, the very last page, I did take our budget from what we thought October was going to be. I put against what actually happened in October, so you can see over-unders. So again, looking good. Our revenue is actually coming in a little faster in October than we expected. They're at 2.3 million, and we're under budget for the month at 850,000. So in October was a good month. September kind of looked the same, but again, we'll keep tracking this as we go through the year. I think at this point, the budget's right on, and we're looking better, I think, than we expected. So that's the good news. So that was the high flyover fast version. Are there any questions?
Is there a printout of what our unassigned fund balance is right now, and what that's looking like? Or did I miss that on here?
2 point something.
What you look at, if you go back to the very first page under the general fund, the
Yep.
very, very bottom number at 2.3.
Okay.
So from we were back in June 30th, we were at 1 million. Now we're looking at about 2.3.
Okay, thank you.
I thought we were projected at 4.5 at our last finance, with
think
the
it was at
initial
the end of the
preliminary
year.
budget at the end of the year.
If you look back on the third page, you'll see the budget. The budget is there in the second column from the right. You can
3.6?
Yeah, we're projecting 3.6. I think it's a very conservative number. Now, we will be bringing forward a revised budget to the board in January. And I'm hoping we have some settlements with some union contracts, we have a lot better idea exactly where we are. But if nonetheless, we are gonna know for sure who we hired, and we'll be very close on their salaries. We're back in June, we didn't know. We had a lot of turnover, a lot of different teachers, so there was a lot of assumptions put into the original budget.
So that's accounting for that in this number, what you anticipate those contracts will settle.
Well, this budget anticipates the increases that I expect, okay, but I think, well, now we know who the people are.
Yeah.
So we know where the salaries are, pretty close, so it's gonna be closer than what it is.
So I have, okay, yeah. Because I think in the preliminary budget, we were projecting 4.5 million in the unassigned budget, fund balance. And so having it drop to almost $1 million, that,
You mean last year?
yeah, I'll take this offline, that's fine.
Yeah, it can be going. That's fine. Okay.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on to item F, which is the policy review of 424 and 513. Brenda?
Okay, the red line versions were
Yeah, it did
provided
not
you
say that.
in your email, so I don't have paper copies. I hope everybody is okay with that.
Yes.
Is everybody ready? Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started with policy 424, which is our license status policy. You'll see in section 2, item D, this outlines that the district must supply to PELSB the required information. So it's just updating PELSB from Department of Education. In section 3, items B, C, and D, those will all remain the same as Executive Director of Administrative Services throughout the contract. And those were the only changes for that policy.
Okay.
And then for 514, this is our bullying prohibition policy. This policy was just updated recently, so these are just the changes from the 2023 legislative session. So you'll see in section 2, under general statement of policy, numbers 1 through 3 and items B and D. These items outline the act of bullying to include electronic technology on and off school premises. Also, it defines extracurricular activities, and it defines malicious and sadistic conduct against a protected class. Section,
So, can I just clarify? Sorry. So I know this is one of the concerns with like cyberbullying type things where if it doesn't happen on district property, but, so now this is saying if it does, there's something to do about it?
If it doesn't happen on district property, you typically have to look at, is there some kind of a nexus connecting it to school? Is there a significant disruption to the school day, to the teaching and learning from the bullying? So it's really a case-by-case basis whether or not we can do anything.
It's challenging.
Yeah, it is. Section 8, under notice, item B explains that the policy must be posted in each building, which we do. Item C explains that the policy must be provided to each employee or contractor at their time of hire, which we also do when we're onboarding. And item F explains each school must develop a process for discussing the policy with students and parents, independent contractors, and employees. We do have a presentation for workshop week. We have a letter for parents and contractors, and a process has been developed for students, usually given in October during anti-bullying week. And that is it for that policy.
Okay. Any questions on those? All right, thanks, Brenda.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item G on our agenda, which is the public engagement discussion. The board has been engaging in this discussion for a while now on how we want to engage our public and what that looks like. This has also been part of the discussion around public comment and what that would look like. We wanted to bring that back in combination or with our stakeholder sessions. So open the floor to discussion for that. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, let's put it back.
What?
Do we need do we need a vote on it, or do we just do it, or?
Well, I think one of the things I think we've talked about is, if we were to bring public comment back, when would we do it? Would we record it?
What
would it look like? What it
Discussion
would look
around
like.
the public engagement, though, here was to bring back a holistic review and discussion about what we want to do as a board for all public engagement and how that would fit into what we want to do. That was the ask for bringing it back tonight.
Correct, but public comment was part of that.
I know, but
We
what's
had
the
that discussion.
holistic review about how we want to be engaged in our community?
Well, and I know I mentioned this to Kim too, like, I feel like we need to, and I would be happy to be the person responsible for this, just because I'm very interested in it, but I think we need to develop some sort of subcommittee in terms of targeting, making a plan outside of, and then bringing that to the board.
And what is
So-
like, could you help me understand
So,
what you mean by the plan?
For instance, community engagement, we've talked about, is really kind of obviously very comprehensive. Public comment is one part of community
Yep.
engagement, and so that's one facet. But how are we reaching all of our community in terms of what kinds of spaces are we going to offer any sort of forum with our residents, with students? How are we bringing in student voice, those kinds of things? And so I have a lot of interest in this, and I've brought it up before, but I feel like we need to actually make progress on it. We need to just develop this offline.
Whatever the broader plan strategy might be.
Yes.
And a component could be public comment, or other aspects of
Yes.
that, or enhancements to the
Or
plan.
like a question and answer session or
Yeah,
something.
how are,
Yeah.
like, I brought this up a long time ago. The city council went into the Avonlea neighborhood and met with residents there in their community center. So how are we actually creating spaces that are accessible to residents who maybe can't come here for a public comment or a stakeholder session, who maybe can bring their children to a, community event? And make sure we're rotating different areas of the district, so getting to, for instance, like Elko New Market. How often are we getting to that area to connect with residents there and hear what their concerns are, things like that?
I'm 100% in favor of putting a plan together, but I am not aligned with waiting on putting public comment in for that to be finished. I'm okay with putting public comment in, and then we can make tweaks to it based on any inputs that we might gather along the way in crafting that strategy. But to me, wait however long it takes for that strategy to be developed, again, from my point of view, limits stakeholders' ability to provide input and comment.
So I don't think that process should take long. I think tonight, the whole discussion around this, and it would have to be more than 10 minutes, but the intent of putting it on the agenda tonight was to develop that. That's our board goal, was to increase input on public engagement.
Yep.
And tonight, we were supposed to all come to the meeting with ideas of how to be engaged through these intentional interactions, through our community forums, school events, being at sporting events, robotics, tournaments, social events with Rotary, Chamber, Elko New Market, Lakeville area, the different fundraisers that we usually are expected to be at. How do we go out and recognize, like, McDonald Eye Care? They're highly involved in our school district, and they just celebrated their 40th year here as a business, being out there, recognizing them, our stakeholder sessions, public comment. I mean, there's a lot of areas here that we can all be a part of. We just need to know, most of this is already established. It's just being committed that a mix of different board members are gonna be at these different events. And then really the only effort that needs to be done at this point around the community forum and those intentional interactions is where and when and what do they look like.
So do you two want to take that on and come back to the board with a proposal in a couple weeks?
And we certainly can, but that's I think what's left here to do is to what those intentional interactions and those community forums look like, and maybe list out a lot of these different things and when they are, because they should be at where they are. They need to be across our district. And the most successful public interactions and engagements that I've seen, and I don't know, Terry, you can maybe agree or disagree, are the ones where we're out in the community rather than having them come here. Because we touch so many more.
Yep.
And everywhere from our senior citizens to our active citizens to our students and everything.
Yeah, you meet them where they're at.
Yep,
That's
gonna
much
be
more
your most successful interaction.
rather than having them come on and talk to us.
Yep,
We're gonna have coffee. You know, you meet them where they're at.
yep. So I'm
Well, I
happy
would-
to do that.
Yeah, I would just say, not who is interested in being part of, I mean, I know, obviously, we both expressed interest, you as well, Terry.
I'll go with you.
If
Three of
anybody
us?
else is interested, let me know, and we can certainly,
Well, we can only do 3.
right,
So we have Terry, Carly, and Judy interested in that?
Awesome. And we'll have a plan to sign off on.
Since I'm retired, you guys just tell me when we meet.
But I still think there's more to this discussion, because last time we were talking about the difference between a stakeholder session and public comment, and if we should have one of each available each month to provide different avenues, because public comment is specifically different. And the things that were different about it before were the facts that it was recorded, that the entire board was present, and that people had that opportunity. Now, the discussion last time, we talked about not having it recorded. Stakeholder sessions, there are a few board members that attend those, about 3 each time. We try to rotate those as much as possible. It is difficult because they occur before the meeting, and people work. So that has limited which board members attend on those events. And some of the feedback that we received from the community was that people wanted to talk to the entire board. Some of the things we talked about last time, like I said, we're not having it recorded or doing it prior to the board meeting. We talked about limiting, if it was recorded, to items on the agenda for them to comment on, because that would make it relevant to that time and space. So those were the things that were discussed, and I'm asking for opinions on that and what people are thinking about that.
I made my statement last year on it. 1 public engagement, 1 public comment. You have the public comment the way it is, you have it on the issue, you have it a taxpayer, you have it a parent from the community, and public engagement is fine the way it is.
I'm confused.
You're fine.
Yeah. Are you talking
You agreed with me last
Are you
year.
comparing stakeholders with,
No, I said
No.
1 of each. You
He
agreed
said
with
one
me
of
last
each,
year.
so
Oh,
like you
one
have
of
the
each, but he's-
stakeholders at the beginning of the month and the public
Okay.
comment
Yeah.
All right.
then during the regular meeting.
So I'm in favor of putting public comment in, starting at the next regular board meeting, and it only happens once a month. So leveraging the exact same way that we did it before it got canceled. And then as we learn more and make tweaks, we can adjust it thereafter. So that's what I would like to do, and I'd like to get thoughts from the rest of the group. Would you do?
I know, that's
do
what
you
you,
want- do
that's
want
what
it?
you would like
I
to
know,
do, but
but
I
would you?
think the rest of the board needs to have input, whether it's recorded or not, or
So here's my proposal. You guys tell me yes or no.
Okay.
Do you want it starting at the
well,
next
that's
regular
not,
board meeting?
like, just let everybody have their input before you maybe put your.
Yeah.
There's gotta be discussion
Yeah.
and dialogue, not just, do you want thumbs up?
Let me rephrase the question. Are we in favor of having public comment to begin at the next regular board meeting as a first step? And then if there's alignment that we want it, then we can talk about the details of the nuances of that particular meeting.
I'd rather have the details worked out before I commit.
Mhm.
What kind of details would you like to have?
Pardon?
What kind of details would you like to have?
Time limit, how many recorded? I mean, it will have, you say once a month, it'll be every board meeting then.
Yep.
Every board meeting, yeah.
Okay. So what time limit do you think is reasonable?
I think this is a group decision, not my decision. I think we need to decide as a group what we want to do.
I propose 5 minutes. Is that reasonable or is that not enough?
Like,
You're
minutes
pushing
per
this,
person?
Brian.
Yeah.
I think he's just trying to figure out the.
Can I ask if you watched any of our meetings
I
when we
have.
had it?
I have.
And you still feel that there's value and importance letting people use our avenue of communication to our community to send out misinformation and and not be able to respond to them in any way?
So the forum, so the proposal is to get it out there so that our stakeholders have a chance to share their points of views. But if we want to make tweaks to it, I have no issues with doing that. So if the ask is, we want the detailed and we'll make the tweaks, how long is that going to take? It's already been 11 months now, and we can't even get public comment back out. It got taken off in the first place without any vote or approval during a regular board meeting. Did it get taken out during a board meeting?
No, I think it was a work session.
It
but
was a
there's no
work session,
policy.
and we wanted to try it to see how it would work.
Got it. So you voted during a work session?
We
to
don't
remove it?
vote in work
We don't
sessions.
vote on that.
Oh, so you just,
It was just a common thing we decided to do. Actually, it was kind of divided. I remember that Dave and I were both in favor of having one of each, but the majority of the board said, let's try it, see how it works.
why was it removed?
Why was it
Because the
removed?
majority, he said because the majority of the board said that.
Majority of the board wanted to try something else. We were having difficult,
It was causing divisiveness in the community.
and the two policemen were
It
here.
was only being a one-way discussion, and people were coming to public comment thinking that they would be able to have a response that night from the board, and you
And they were
typically
attacking
didn't.
each other.
And the people that came, there were people that were coming that weren't stakeholders in the district. And then we thought there were better ways of being able to do it. And a lot of the issues that were coming before us weren't board issues, they were administrative issues. And then it just turned into more administrative issues coming before the board, because everybody saw that so-and-so came, so then they came. And then it turned into, people weren't even addressing the board, they were coming and addressing other public comment people. And it showed no purpose, we didn't gain anything, and it didn't give us any knowledge or insight to anything that the board needed to act on.
Bree, did you have something to add?
So was this just during a certain, I'm just trying, because I haven't been, a part of the board or anything, but has it always been that way before? Like, was this during just one point of time, or has it been for a very long time that there was just this huge divisiveness per?
So
COVID.
No.
Is it just during the COVID
it's not
time?
just
Well, no, it went
COVID.
before
Or was
all-
it way in front of
It's been
COVID?
over all the years that we've had it. It
Yeah.
ebbs and flows depending on whether it's a political year, whether you have high emotional decisions being made.
Boundary
Which we
changes.
will have.
Okay.
COVID obviously was part of it, but it ebbs and flows depending on, like, we can go months with not hearing from anybody.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, when there's something that's very emotional, or a program change, or a budget, or a boundary adjustments, or any
some
of
of those
that,
things make sense,
then it
but-
just soars and becomes very, it just becomes a very tight, like, boundary adjustments starts getting this neighborhood against that neighborhood.
Move them, not us.
Yeah,
It's
all
tough.
that kind of stuff.
It was tough.
So it just ebbs and flows. So the most recent one was COVID, but that hasn't been the only time we've had these tense issues. And then the administration, a lot of this is to try to sidetrack decisions that are made by administrators, and instead of going through the communication process, they just jump right to the board, and then, we push back to the communication process, but that's not what they want.
See, I'm not necessarily against public comment,
No,
but I don't want to see what happened in Farmington.
last
Well,
night.
I think what might be a solid
Just
compromise at this point, just given the range of concerns that have been brought up on all perspectives, is bringing back public comment, but having it not be video recorded. Because I do think there's something to be said for people having an opportunity to speak to
Yep.
the entire board.
Yep.
I've seen students come and present on things off topic from the agenda, and I still want that to be an opportunity for people to bring things that we don't know about that are maybe going on. It doesn't mean we can't redirect communication, But to me, that feels like the middle ground of all the concerns that we bring it back, but that we don't record it, because that's what creates all the hysterical kinds of
Good
things.
point. I would bring you back to what's the purpose?
See, I'm not sure either.
So, and that, I guess that's what I haven't heard from folks, what the real purpose, because I've heard engagement, I've heard public comment. I guess I just want to know, because from your perspective, you need to know the purpose of putting something in place that either is or isn't going to do what you want it to achieve.
I think it's the accessibility of the entire board.
That's the
But
argument.
what's the purpose?
Yep.
What-
purpose
what's
is
Public
the
service,
purpose of
we
that?
should be accessible to anybody if they have a concern to address. That's what
We are, though,
stakeholder
through-
sessions
we
are
are
for, but
through
they're only
email,
like for
though.
3
Yep.
people. Some people don't like the email.
But can, if that's the purpose, then then you could do the same thing with your stakeholder session, just say it's for all
It's
board
for all
members that are going
boards.
to be there.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that, I'm just saying if that's the purpose of the intent
And you're gonna have
of
to
what you're
change the
trying to
time,
do.
because board members can't go to, a lot of them can't go at the same time. And then we have quorums, so then we're there, all of us.
Well, that's what he's saying, you just update the stakeholder session to be the full board.
I was just asking, I'm not trying to provide you an answer. I can tell you from my own, I've yet to be in a district where I've had any board members that have said, this is the best thing we've ever done, was that public comment. Community engagement aspects of going and listening to people and talking to people, I've heard that. I've yet to hear any district, any state that I've been in that will say public comment is the only way that I gleaned information from something I wanted to know from my community. It's normally more genuine, it's normally more comfortable for people if similar to several of you said, if you're reaching them where they are instead of asking them to come to you. That's just my 2 cents, but again, I've experienced it in 4 different states, multiple different districts, and so I've yet to see one that's just been 100% everybody that's turning cartwheels saying it was the best thing to do.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, and I think the problem that I'm trying to solve is that there are some stakeholder members that want, like Kim said, full board to be able to share them, while email is an appropriate path, while a phone call to individual board members is an appropriate path. I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't my school, this is a community school, and so they should be able to have access to the 7 individuals that are making decisions on their behalf. And then there are times where there are stakeholders that probably also want to know, hey, I have that exact same question from another stakeholder. So again, having it recorded, in my mind, there's value in that. And so my recommendation is like, here's, as I heard, here's a proposal that I will share. I think it should be recorded. I think it should be 4 people max. It is determined by a draw. The topic has to be around an agenda that's, the topic has to be around a topic that's already on the agenda. You can only speak if you are a school district resident. And then, because there's 4 people, we'd have 3 minutes for them to speak with 2 minutes of board interaction if warranted. So that's my proposal.
I do not want it recorded.
I agree.
Are you saying video recorded and or voice recorded? None at all?
I don't
Zero.
understand. If
I'm
we
just
want
clarifying.
to, if the purpose is to give people the full exposure to the board, or to all board members, I mean, there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. But, the intent is for us to hear what they want to share with us. And I think we should just keep it to that, to just what they want to share with us. Because again, it also sends a lot of misinformation out to our community with what they're sharing with us, and sometimes it might be the incorrect process, the incorrect information, invalid data, whatever it is. It does.
If they have 2 minutes to respond, where we're saying some of the information you shared during that was inaccurate, blah, 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 this person will follow up with you from the district.
That
And
is,
it's-
if the information, the data's about us, but if it's not about us, and there's,
I just also think we can't control how it is subsequently
can't.
used down the road
yes.
for or against any one individual. And I think if To me, like I said, the middle ground here is we bring it back, we don't record it, we see how that goes. And if it's like we don't get a lot of engagement, part of that might just be because people are wanting it on, recording, and what does that mean?
It might make it more open because the stakeholder sessions, a lot of people like those because they are recorded.
Right.
So that may even phase out, who knows?
Well, it's a step in that direction, and we see how it goes.
So you would be open to public comment with it not being recorded, but it happens during the regular business meeting, 4 people, stakeholder draw, topic has to be on the agenda.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
No.
What
part don't you?
Because I've seen, like I said, I've seen students come forth to share things that aren't on the agenda.
I think if it's not recorded, then I'm not as concerned about the item being on the agenda or not. Because to me, that adds relevancy as to why during the business meeting, you would need to address us if you're talking about an item that we have on the agenda that night. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So if it's not recorded and really it's kind of just another avenue for people to address the entire board, then I don't feel like, I would agree with her, I don't think it needs to be linked to the agenda.
So it can be whatever topic that a stakeholder might want to share.
That's what it's always been.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, whatever topic within your certain parameters, because you can't have them talking about staff members.
Oh, no.
Certain-
Yeah.
There's certain
Sure,
parameters.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You just can't say it can be any topic. There's certain guidelines that they can't.
Well, and those
You
are
can't
shared
allow
with the individual before.
And I'm just saying, but when I just heard you can be any topic,
Okay.
I
Right.
think you
Were
got.
there
You were
guidelines?
just-
Yes, I was just clarifying. I
Were there
wasn't saying-
guidelines that were shared when public comment was in place to
Yes,
stakeholders?
you would get, if you were gonna be a speaker, you would get a guideline
Oh.
about what you can't talk about, I remember seeing, maybe I
Whatever
saw
that
it
list might
online.
be.
You can't
Yeah.
talk about staff members, you can't, individuals.
So if it wasn't recorded, could we go back to leveraging those same guidelines
Yes.
and then have it at 6:40 or 7, what time?
Well, we
7?
can't change meeting times at
So
this
have it at
point.
7 and leverage the first 20 minutes as
You
a
can't really have a
non-recorded
cl-
Couldn't we
session?
do it?
I don't know I haven't looked at the
We don't
guidelines.
have a policy for it.
No, I'm just saying, if you had guidelines, you may want to review those guidelines before you say yes.
It would be nice to
Well, the
implement
guidelines
all
would
under
have
the
to be
guidelines of the
The
stakeholder
guidelines
sessions.
would have to be updated to what it, because right now it was for 30 minutes. Everybody had 3 minutes, and when the 30 minutes was up, that was done. And the last that we had, they were pre-registered. They had to put their name into a hat, and if there were more people than what we could do in 30 minutes, we just drew for them.
I feel like if we put it in place in January, that gives us time to review it. And
Yeah.
for people to feel like they have time to kind of
When's our
make
next
sure we.
regular board meeting?
2 weeks.
Well, you're gonna have to have public comment in December anyways, because it's mandatory.
For
Well,
truth
that's
and
the
taxation.
truth and taxation, that's a different one.
Right.
You can only
That's
talk
a
about
different
the
public
taxation
comment.
piece, yeah.
Still gonna have to have it.
Could you have it at half hour before the regular board meeting? Instead
Yes,
of
from
starting at
6:30 to
7,
7.
go 6:30 to 7, and then the whole board be here, and then we move right into the
I
regular
would
board
recommend it be
meeting?
from 6:15 to 6:45.
Right, so we have time
so you have a
to-
break,
yeah.
and transition.
And we probably would meet over there because people will be coming in here, right?
No, I think we
No,
should
we
be
can-
here.
No, we'd be up here.
Right, we'd be up here.
Oh, yeah, okay,
And
that'll
then when
work.
it's time for the regular
And
board
it's a
meeting, open
public
the door.
meeting, so
Yeah, it's a
anybody
public
can still
meeting.
come and listen, it's
Yeah.
just that it wouldn't be
Right,
recorded.
yeah.
Yeah, it works.
But we would want a break after.
I think that's a
Right.
fair compromise to bring it back, to try it in a more controlled avenue, kind of like we've done with public engagement. Are you comfortable with that, Brian, to do like
So have-
6:15 to 6:45?
Well, it's not
6:15?
Brian, it's his board comfortable.
Well, yeah, I'm also asking him
I understand
because-
that, but we have to be talking about it as a board level. We're not here to appease Brian, we're here to do what's best for the district from the board level.
Right.
I think what's
mean
best
it
for the
just
district is
appease
having it
Brian.
recorded, so. that's my
Your
point of
thing
view.
is just the recording.
I think so. It should be at 7, have it recorded, and then for those who want to speak. But, as a compromise, if you guys want to, if Judy thinks it's best that we start at 6:15, we can definitely do that and have it not recorded. And But if the two minor things that we need to adjust on the guidelines is to have it 3 minutes with 2 minutes of dialogue and maybe a 4 people max, like, is there anything else that we need to update in the guidelines then? I mean, other than what was already set in place?
Yeah, the
Do
whole
you
process.
want the board to be able to discuss? Because in public comment, they don't.
I feel like this is where I'm suggesting we defer the actual plan, or like the starting it until January, so that gives us some time to kind of, everybody review the guidelines. If we have a tentative
good.
plan, 6:15 to 6:45.
Those details will
And then
work
what
out.
does it look like? That way everybody can come in with a fresh mind and,
Okay, the only, seems like division we have right now, I don't know whether not everybody's speaking, is the idea of film or.
recording.
What?
Recording.
Recorded or not, and I think we should find out, does the majority want to go with recording or not recording?
I think it was just stated, not recording.
Pardon?
Well, does anybody, you've made your opinion very clear.
Well, I mean, it was
Does-
just stated.
Does anybody else feel strongly that they?
If we're gonna do it, I want it recorded, and I don't wanna spend extra time, so that's just me as a.
I'm comfortable with recording.
I'm not.
I don't want recording.
Bree?
I guess I could try both. I mean, I've never been experienced to it, so, you know,
Can we?
it's hard to
But
say
if you only have
if I
four
want it
mem-
or
If you
not.
only have 4 members that come at 6:15, then you can rotate it or not, if you don't wanna.
What do you,
No, we're
What are
having
you
all
talking
members.
about?
Entire board.
the entire board?
He had suggested 4.
No, he
No,
said
no,
4
speakers.
people.
4 speakers.
Four speakers, yeah.
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 My suggestion is let's try it not recorded and see how it goes.
Dave, since you're on 917, how does that impact your attendance on something like that with those meetings?
Every once in a while. You could.
I guess for
Like
me, I
tonight,
don't
like tonight,
have a
it-
yes or no.
like tonight, it would have impacted because I
Bree?
had to come right from 917 and drive right over here, so.
I would be okay with it if we don't do recording, to at least have that avenue for stakeholders to share for all board members.
Yes.
Now, again, my preference would be for them, whenever they share, other community members was like, hey, I've got I'm aligned to whatever that person's question is or topic is, yes. So if we did 6:15, what other issues do we have? Because I'm like, it's really not complicated to put it back, in my mind.
So you're
I
saying
think they should just have
you
to
go
sign
ahead
up
with
for it.
not recording it to start with?
I would be okay with not recording it if we
Okay.
could have it start like at our next board meeting.
Oh, I don't know are we ready for that?
Could we do it?
I thought the January start was a good
The
idea.
next board meeting is a work session before the board meeting, so you won't have
Oh,
time.
so the next regular board meeting is
I'm
November
sorry, that's
21st
the
in
December
2 weeks.
13th meeting, I'm saying. Your 28th is a regular board meeting, but
Okay.
on the 13th, you've already back-to-back yourself.
Okay.
Well, on the 28th, we have stakeholders signed up.
Yep.
We
So
do.
we
Do you have
could,
Well, then
stakeholders
can we
tonight?
ask them to see if they want to come into
no,
a
because
board
this
meeting?
session wasn't advertised as an engagement session, so we have it for the 28th. We have people
Did
that are
people-
signed up.
Is that what do you
people
want to
come and
present
try to
for the
be-
whole board and then?
Were there people that wanted to be here tonight?
But it wasn't advertised as a stakeholder session.
It's on the website as a third
It's
and
the
fourth
third and
Tuesday.
fourth Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay,
So they're signed up for the 28th.
okay.
But do you think they would want to talk to all 7 board members versus just 3 minutes at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever time that we have that?
I think we keep using the word in all transparency, which is well overused, but I think if we're gonna do that, we should just keep conducting business as usual. And at our next board meeting on the 28th, we let them know what the plan is and we share what that public guidelines are and stuff so that they know what the plan is during our board communication section. And then that would start then in January.
So
We
need
couldn't
to-
start in December because we have the truth in
Truth in
taxation.
taxation. Got
Correct.
it.
Right.
So then, at the regular board meeting, during the communications section, we can say that we're gonna do this. Guidelines are, so we have to update the guidelines, and can we put that on the agenda for next week, in our next meeting, to make sure this is
We don't have one.
Next week.
Oh, or on the 28th?
The regular board meeting on the
28th is a regular board meeting.
Do we need to vote on it then, during the regular board meeting?
No.
We don't need to vote on it because it's not in policy.
Got it.
As long as we have consensus, we don't.
Do we have consensus?
Can we communicate about something like this via email in terms of the guidelines and plan?
No. I don't think so.
You guys, the guidelines are just like how long it's gonna be, when it's gonna start, when it is.
No, I know, but I'm just saying,
So, I mean,
can
we
have
pretty
con-
much determined that right now, right? That it's gonna start in January, whatever that meeting is.
6:15,
And it's
not
gonna be
recorded.
from
They
6:15 to
They need to
6:45.
They need to register.
I think four people. right?
4 people.
Are we limiting it?
No, but 7
I
can be
don't-
there.
I'm sorry, let me rephrase that.
If-
4
no.
speakers.
Oh, 4 speakers, not 4
speakers.
members.
Because a lot of districts
Yeah.
will restrict it to the, if you have like 5 people that want to talk on one
Yes.
topic, they will
Yes.
restrict it to
Right,
one.
yes, 4 speakers.
But-
4 speakers.
But
yeah.
for 30 minutes?
3 minutes and 2-minute board interaction if warranted.
Oh,
So that'll give you a total of 20 minutes with a 10 to 15-minute break.
My only comment to you is you may want to run past your legal counsel your response, because most legal counsels will tell you you should not respond.
Yeah.
So I would check with either Mick or Trevor, because.
How does that
they're-
change if we're responding during public engagement versus responding during public
Because
comment
it's,
that's
because
not
it's,
recorded?
because they will say that it does. I don't know the legalities. I'm just saying you want to check with them. I'm not, can't tell you, because I can tell you in other states,
Oh.
it can't do it. They
And
tell you not to
we
do
were
it, so
very
I would.
particular because public comment actually becomes part of your board meeting, your regular board meeting, whereas the stakeholder session is more of an informal dialogue and interaction for discussion. And you'll see that the stuff that typically comes to public comment is something that they typically, I don't know, am I fair to say that a lot of it typically tries to legally trip you up?
Like, for example, let me tell you, here would be an example. Let's say I
Not
came in as a
recorded.
public
It's
comment.
not
I
recorded.
came in as a public comment person and said, hey, I really think Dave Haveman is this, that, and the other, calling me. And a board member goes, hey, I think you're right. You now have just set yourself up for a lawsuit, because all it takes is one person to say, hey, Dave, do you know that the board talked about you? And there was a quorum of them. You've now just created a legal liability for yourself, and have an attorney, I think you would probably.
I'm not saying a word.
And I'm
Would
gonna
probably, so that's why I'm saying, I think that's my aspect of
I'm
it,
gonna
not to
tell-
make the waters more muddy for you, but I do believe that there are some things you can, hey,
I
can you
I
give, can
do
you give me
agree
more
with you, you have to be
clarification?
careful when, you really do have to be.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and we
why.
say it's not recorded, but it will be recorded.
Oh, yeah.
People will have their phones there and they'll be recording it to get reactions and responses from board.
Well, that's one thing I think we should ban.
You
I'm on
can't.
record.
can't
You
do
can't,
that.
can't.
I don't care, I can still think that.
Can you say
You're an
that you
attorney,
don't
you
give
should know that.
permission or whatever?
Well, I think
I don't
Mick
think you should
or
be
Trevor
able
would
to
tell
put something
you,
like this.
you can say
I think
that,
it's
but
distracting and
they still
annoying.
legally have the
For the
ability to
record,
put
for
their
everybody
phone on
listening.
the counter and report whatever they want.
But if it's recorded, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's like, again, like whatever we say, whatever we share.
If it's
like,
recorded, it's an
We're a representative
audience.
of them, and so having it
Sorry.
formal or informal, it's like, the more information we can gather out of what our stakeholders are wanting, or how they want, how their schools are running, like, that's our job, like, I don't know.
But there might be
That's
s-
not what they come to us about, though.
Well, that might be your experience, but it hasn't been mine, and so I
That's
want
what
to.
I'm saying,
I
but see,
know.
that's where experienced voices that have been through it need to be respected, because we have been through it, we see what it's about,
Yeah.
we know what it does. What happened last night to Farmington was not pleasant either, and
Oh,
to
that
be
was
hitting the
nasty.
news. I mean, it's just
But
like.
that's part of the
And
job.
you have to have a strong chair.
That's part
You
of the
have to have
job.
strong
Part of the
board
job,
members.
guys.
You have-
I
I
mean-
know, but you have to have people that know what to expect and how to handle it.
Yes.
That didn't happen last night.
So.
I don't think like when the safety of the community in general becomes a concern, that it's like a productive, like having been in this room when those kinds of things were happening,
Yeah.
and it didn't feel safe, and there were guns on our premise,
Mm.
like that stuff.
And what happened last night for Farmington? I mean, that's,
I don't know what happened.
well, it wasn't pretty. It was on the news. And it's only going to be worse with situations with what we have. We have very emotional decisions that are gonna be happening this next year.
Yeah, we got boundary issues, we got budgets and stuff
Well,
like that.
that's where I actually, I mean, I do think that a lot of these, when we've had these kind of public, or the stakeholder sessions, it's typically Doug who is responding to the questions, because they often are admin related. And I don't know about the like 2-minute response, just because that does put you on the spot potentially, or you could just say, that's something I'll look into.
Yeah.
I feel like as long as there's a closed loop, that, you know, someone is following up with the person who's presented, I would actually just prefer to have more opportunities for more people, as opposed to limiting it to 4 and having it be a dialogue.
The dialogue is the stakeholder session, the
Yeah.
public comment is to hear and listen.
Because I don't wanna put our, I don't wanna put our district at risk, of course, of saying something that we shouldn't as board members, that we don't know anything about, or make Doug feel like he has to constantly know exactly what's coming.
But I feel like the interaction also allows us to like seek more information. I mean, 3 minutes may not be enough for them to explain, or maybe it allows us to ask for, can you provide more clarity around it? I mean, we don't have to say.
If we need
you
more
agree.
information,
Sure.
we can say, hey, can you come to the next stakeholder session so we can engage more with this, and we'll bring someone to the table that has information that you requested or something.
So maybe maybe it could be 6 speakers, let's say, for 3 minutes, and then you have a cushion around that, should people have additional questions or.
It's about 5 people with a 1-minute interaction where we can ask for their.
See, this is why I want to punt this to January.
Want to negotiate the
So
teacher
it will be
contract?
the only-
You'd be good
yeah.
at that.
I
We don't have.
the interaction part.
I don't think
with-
I want interaction.
That,
I would
with the
agree with Judy,
legal,
what
with the
everybody
legal
voted.
thing, and us, someone possibly saying something
And
that's
recording.
not legal, or get yourself into trouble, that's where I would be more concerned with.
Yeah.
I'd be more
honestly,
concerned with
I
the
mean-
chair, because she's gonna be running the meeting.
Well, it's,
She's-
if you had,
I'd
if
be
you had
concerned.
questions, I think that's okay. Like, if there was something that, but I don't think it's good for us to give any feedback.
All right, so
3
right now I
minutes,
have.
5 people.
But here's what I have. Right now I have from 6:15 to 6:45, starting in January, people have to register in advance. It is not recorded because it's occurring prior to our meeting. 6 speakers, 3 minutes.
4 people, or 4 board members, or 3?
No, all
No.
7.
No,
And
all
first,
board.
All board
first however
members.
many register get to speak, or are we gonna look at different topics?
It would be like,
Call me at home.
if we can serve
You can
the
call
amount
me
of
at
people
home.
that have registered in that 30-minute time frame, then fine, but if we have too many, then we would have to draw names.
Okay.
So it's not
But
a pre,
do
it's not
they-
a pre-advance, it's a show up and sign up at that day.
It would have to be.
That's what we
Yes.
used to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, but sign up. Hey, kid,
They had to sign up, they had to be registered.
I'm just checking, because that's.
Okay, the
how it
only
is
thing
now.
I do
No, they
disagree
had to
with
be
before the
registered.
meeting, though, just for the record, I disagree with.
With
I
what?
want to hear what she
They had to be registered before the meeting started, so they had to be
Yes.
checked in and signed up in the name in the hat, or whatever,
So like
before
registration
they
at 6.
started.
at 6, yeah.
Dave, what were you saying, sorry?
I'm not in agreement with doing it before the meeting, just because it's more extra time, but you guys decide what you want to do.
But if
Well,
it's
we'd
at 7, it
stay
has to be
later.
recorded then.
It doesn't have to be, we just started recording at 7.
Oh, I
But then
suppose,
we
yeah.
just stay later. So it's either you start earlier or stay later, if we have a public
Oh,
comment.
I'd
You
rather
wanna stay
start
later,
early.
Dave?
I love staying late.
Hey,
I'm on 7 hours. I was at 9:17 for 2.5. and then
Dude,
there
I
were
deal with
legislative people.
10
They're administrative
infants and
people. I'm on
toddlers every
7
single
hours. I
day.
didn't even know what day
But
it
deal
is.
with one right here. So after the individual has 3 minutes, I feel like there has to be an acknowledgement that we heard or we understood them, but that feedback loop, like, are we
Maybe
gonna
at the
say
end, we
Doug's
just
gonna look
say,
into
like,
it, or we'll follow up with you,
Well, no,
or?
so what, yeah, that's what we always, so after they speak, we would usually say thank you. If it was just because they wanted to share something, we'd say thank you, and then we'd go on to the next speaker. If it was something that needed to be followed up, and we'd say thank you, the superintendent or somebody from his staff will get back to you in the next, I think we said 48 hours or something like that, and then the superintendent would redirect it to whoever on his staff needed to follow up. And
But
that's
like,
what
as someone who
we
came and
always did.
spoke, I didn't always get follow-up. So that's where I feel like it is important
Okay,
to
well,
get
that was a whole
the
Gotta-
full-
gotta
time
follow
though, when
up
you
whatever the
had
feedback
a lot going on.
Yeah, I'm
But-
just
But in
saying.
the normal practices, that's what it would have been.
I never had follow-up either,
Really?
ever.
Man, who was the superintendent before this guy?
Well, let's,
Well, and I'm just gonna tell you from my own perspective, what you just said isn't them coming to talk to you, it's them coming to talk to me. So then I don't know what the public comment is really about. If you're gonna say,
Yep.
hey, I want the superintendent to take care of it,
Yep.
then it's not a board issue. It is part of, and I think Bree and I talked about this maybe even when she was thinking about running for the board. I think we talked about it. I said, you know, if 95% of 98, my experience is 98% of the things that come to public comment are administratively related. And so they're coming to talk to you as a board, and then you're referring them to the administrator, which is,
but I
Which
don't
is
know,
the
I like
same
to
for
have,
everything.
as a board member, I want to somewhat have a pulse on what the concerns are in the community.
But
Whether or
you
not
do
I'm
by
the one
doing-
to deal with it or not.
You do, though, doing this engagement. I tell you, there hasn't been, I mean, all of this, I've probably been one of the most active board members on this board for the last several years. And anything I ever heard at public comment was never new news. I knew what was going on, I knew the kids, you know, when we just had a principal, one of the custodians at his building, his son passed away, and I got a call from that building, because they know I go to the funerals and stuff. I mean, we have to make an attempt to be out in the community, and then you hear about all that. I mentor young kids, the high school kids, and you hear what's going on in the schools. You walk through their lunchroom at lunchtime, you hear what's going on. You have to be involved. As a board member, we don't just come and do this and that. If you're not going to find a way to be engaged in the community other than this or this, you're not gonna hear what's going on.
I don't
Can
think
we
that's what
circle
people
back
are
and finish this
arguing
topic,
for.
and we'll come back to that?
I think that this is one avenue. And if
Yes, this is just one.
if people are missing that avenue, then, and we don't record it, to me, that's one avenue that we're getting information amongst many.
And I agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think it goes into the big picture about all of this. But I'm just saying, this in itself
One
is not
avenue.
gonna give you what you want. You're gonna need to be in the community
Yes.
to get the rest.
Which is why
So-
we have the subcommittee with Terry, Carly, and Judy working on
Yes.
this.
Yep.
And,
Hey,
and you just went through the thing, I think we all agreed with it.
Okay,
can
But
I,
I think what would be nice, it's not gonna start till January,
right.
I think we should just send that all out to us
I
at
can
some
do that.
point.
yeah.
So we can look at it
make this
again.
are we okay with them being a school district resident or a I don't want to call it stakeholder because like, I feel like I want folks to have,
No, they have to be a stakeholder resident. They have to.
what does that mean? Like they
I
have
mean,
to live in
I'm
Washington?
sorry, a school district resident,
Okay,
a school district resident.
Yep.
A staff member
yep,
or a student.
got it.
That's pretty much it.
District student. I mean,
Okay.
that's.
So I don't want like outside people, like, hey.
That's,
like, this is-
so I'll
No,
tell you
no.
what, so it was, this is what we did, we did 30 minutes, 3 minutes a person, they had to register.
3 minutes.
Yeah, they had to register before the meeting started, and the little registration card had to give their name, they had to put their name and their full address on there, and if they chose not to do that, their name didn't get put in the hat.
Okay.
And then you had to check whether you were a resident of the district, a staff member, or a parent, guardian, or a student, that was the third one. And then that was pretty much it, and then they just went into a little bucket,
Well,
and then we just drew their names.
Yeah,
So
but
pretty much what we had
had
before, but not
people that
recorded.
actually that didn't live here, that used their parents' address here to come to talk from Rosemont and Prior Lake, remember that?
If we reintroduce this, does this impact, I know Doug, you always come to the does this impact anybody else at the DO level? They don't have to come to early public comment.
without knowing what they're talking about, you know, if they're talking about teaching and learning, I'm not gonna have Emily gonna be there, so it's gonna be
It's just a list.
It's the same as stakeholder sessions, right?
No,
If we
it
would be
just- there would
required to be
res-
there.
No really
No
response from
response.
the board, it's just listening.
There was no, but like if I knew somebody was coming to talk about something, Emily came and sat at a couple of the stakeholder sessions because I knew
Yeah.
the topic was going to be.
Oh, and they did put the
something.
topic on that card too.
So that's the only way that I can get somebody from, that I think that it's.
But if we're
valuable.
just listening, it doesn't,
I'm sorry.
if we're just listening.
just
Make it that
listening.
way?
Yeah, if you're just listening, then it's just listening.
Okay.
Can you make it that way where you pre-register so you know the topic, or does that matter?
Well, it
For
sounded
public
like-
comment, it doesn't matter.
I think
You know what I
for-
mean? 'Cause
I
right
think
now
for
we
public
pre-
comment, what we're saying is we don't want a response in the moment.
So it doesn't matter
So it
if
doesn't-
it's
yeah.
pre-done or not pre-done.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Got it.
Are you all aware of what it is right now, what's on the website for everybody to see?
For public comment?
For stakeholder sessions.
Because it sounds like you're just repeating the same thing, so maybe if you think more of you should be there and that would be advertised as something more appealing, we could just continue with what we're doing, but now advertise that at least 5 of 7 board members will be there, because you'll all make an effort to
It'll be a
get there.
quorum of the board.
We'd have to change the time, and it would be a form of the board,
We
yes.
could definitely easily make that change, still capture the information ahead of time. They have to make sure that all of the things that Judy just said is on the sign-up sheet. I have to call them if I see something that's fishy, that they're not actually a member of Lakeville, and communicate. And that way it does give our staff a chance to be there, because Emily wants to hear it if it looks like an issue that pertains to her. I think what
So
you're
right now
trying to
it's
get
just know
at
that
is
they
to be
can't
present for
comment, but
people.
The only difference is it says it's the 3rd and the 4th, so would we just update it to just be the 4th and we just do it
It
once?
could still be the
Yeah.
3rd and the 4th, you just duplicate the same exact thing, but more of you are there. So it hasn't been highly popular to sign up for that, so you're
It will
saying
be.
you want to make
Yeah,
a
but
commitment.
It will
But
be
it's
when
stakeholder
boundary
sessions.
adjustments start.
But in stakeholder sessions, there is interaction back and forth. And so
Yeah.
this one, there wouldn't be. So public comment is
There wouldn't
3
be
minutes for the
public
individual to share their points of view.
But right now it's 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes. We give them 45 minutes.
I think leave stakeholders as it is because it's another time, it's another avenue, something different, and then now we're providing a different avenue for other stakeholders to share right before a board review.
Well, that's what this says.
What was the difference? Because I didn't hear a difference, other than maybe they don't have to register ahead of time?
The number of board members that were going to be there.
Yeah. And there's no interaction
Yep.
in public comment.
You know, Kim, I think you have a good point. I like to think about that. Why don't we just send out this stuff, and we have a couple of months, so let's send this out, think about what Kim said, and maybe let's put it on the next agenda. Oh, no, I don't know if we're gonna put it on agenda. It takes too long.
We wouldn't be able to implement it until January, so
Right.
that does give us some time to process and think about it. And
Good.
in light of time, since it's almost 10 o'clock, we have one item left in the agenda, and we still have closed session.
Oh, I forgot about that, damn.
Yeah,
Oh,
I really feel like we should
Sorry.
move on. Is it okay, are we good to move on? Okay, so let's kind of take our time to process, which is our thing as a board, we like trying to
Sure.
process, so, we'll move on to item H. This is like super simple, it's the policy committee we talked about last time, we just need to decide who's going to be on it. I would like to see some different, since we've got you 3 on one committee, I would like to see some different people show some interest in doing something, so, who would be interested in being on that policy committee that is working on, some of those things?
Okay, I guess me.
I'll
Come on,
back out
Brian,
on
you're the
this
one
and
who
I'll do
likes
policy
policy.
with you.
I give you guys red lines, and so, like,
So Brian and Bree, that's what I'm hearing?
No, I'll do policy. I'm
She's
not
back,
gonna do
it's
this.
me
I'll do
and Terry on
policy.
public
We
engagement.
need some history
I'm
on
not policy, I am, that's.
No, you and I
farthest
are
from my
on,
interest.
you and I
I'll
are
do
on
policy
public
'cause it hasn't been
engagement.
touched in a
We're on
while,
what?
so we'll have to
Community
make sure
engagement.
it's taken care of.
Okay, so we have Brian and Judy on policy?
No, we're only having,
3.
do we need 3? I thought we just need 2.
If there's 3, let them go.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I don't know, I have to think about it because,
oh my gosh.
I don't know.
You let Kim know.
Brian, you're the one that pushes for policy all the time,
Yeah,
and you
but
don't
there's-
want to volunteer to be on it?
Fine, I'll volunteer. I'll be the one. Can I lead it?
No.
I don't think,
Well, couldn't the 3 of us just all work together?
yeah, don't you want to work together?
But on the subcommittee, you would need to decide who's leading it, who's taking notes, to make sure that
I
you're
nominate Bree.
accomplishing the work that we've charged you with as a board.
Yep, I'll lead it.
Okay. Bree, are you going to be on it with Brian and Judy?
I can be on it, yes.
Okay. Carly, I will join you on the public engagement then and just replace Judy, if that's okay?
Well, Terry's
What are you
on it
gonna
too.
do?
Yep.
You two,
We're
you
gonna
and
join three on you.
Carly and Kim. is
For
what
public
she's saying.
engagement.
The
Oh,
public
okay.
engagement.
All right.
Okay. I do want Judy's notes. She's got some great ideas on public engagement.
Okay,
Well, once we present the plan, then Judy can add to it.
great.
Okay.
So for the policy committee that I would
I
ask,
did my homework,
like,
I thought about stuff for today.
depending on what other board members think, since we do have an election coming up next year, and some of the things we've talked about would be like a handbook for the board. I don't know what you guys think about that, but could involve policy/procedure. Just a thought.
Yeah, throw that on the plate too. Okay.
I don't know. And I do have some backlogs of policies that we talked about, and I'll share those with you so that you can get
Thank you.
started. All right, so, having completed those items, the meeting will be closed as permitted by section 13D.05, subdivision 3A, to evaluate the performance of the school district superintendent.
I'll get them on the way out.
Okay. Skin doors.
Yes. Do you mind if we take like a 5-minute break?
Yes.
So we can go back? Thank you.
Bill already.